Chapter 2570. Changhai Holy Kingdom was the closest to Fallen Star's Holy Kingdom. By Long steered the battleship and took 2 days to reach Changhai Holy Kingdom. By then, Changhai Holy Kingdom had already received the news from Fallen Star's Holy Kingdom. The capital city had been destroyed and turned into ruins. More than 80 martial god realm captains and close to 2,000 martial sage realm warriors had been killed. Such shocking news caused a huge commotion in the Changhai Divine Nation. Of course, it was not just Changhai Holy Kingdom. The other 2 holy kingdoms had also received the news. As such, the entire Zero Mainland was in a state of panic. The captains and warriors of the Heaven Punisher tribe were all in danger. No one knew when those 2 mysterious outsider experts would descend upon them. When Tianqing's battleship reached holy capital of Changhai Holy Kingdom, more than 50 martial god realm captains had gathered in the city to discuss countermeasures. Holy capital already had more than 1,000 martial sage realm black armor guards. Now that they had mobilized more than 1,000 martial sage realm black armor guards from the surrounding cities, the total number of black armor guards had reached 2,000. Even so, the captains were still afraid and trembling in fear. In the dazzling holy palace, the 50 captains had been discussing for half a day, but they were unable to come up with a perfect plan. Someone suggested that they should leave Changhai Holy Kingdom and lie low for a while. This suggestion was immediately rejected by the captains. Zero Mainland and the entire Purple Cloud Star were the Heaven Punisher tribe's territory. How could they give up the entire Holy Kingdom just because of 2 foreign tribe elite? Wouldn't this be a laughingstock that would go down in history for 1,000 years? Most of the captains agreed that they could not retreat for the sake of the Heaven Punisher tribe's dignity and honor. They had to gather all the captains in Holy Capital and set up an inescapable trap inside and outside Holy Capital to wait for the other party to come and die. Everyone knew that Changhai Holy Kingdom was the closest to Fallen Star's Holy Kingdom and would most likely become the next target of the foreign tribe elite. As such, after the captains had come up with a plan, they immediately carried it out. Other than the 4 most powerful captains guarding the Holy Palace, the rest of the captains rushed to the surroundings of Holy Capital to set up holy arrays and traps. After a day of work, the captains set up 12 arrays in Holy Capital. 6 of them were defensive arrays and 6 of them were extremely powerful holy arrays. Moreover, close to 2,000 black armored guards were also on standby, maintaining a state of alert at all times. However, after everyone spent the night in a tense atmosphere, the inside and outside of Fairy's capital remained calm. The expected attacks and massacres did not come. In the dead of night, the night sky was as dark as ink, shrouded by thick dark clouds. Everything was silent between heaven and earth. An ordinary-looking captain in silver armor was cruising outside the divine capital with a pitch-black saber at his waist. He circled the 1,000-foot-tall city wall and walked alone in the dark night. Not only did they have to patrol the city walls, but they also had to investigate the situation outside the city. As long as there was even the slightest movement, he would immediately send out a signal to warn the captains in the city. But just as he passed the corner of the wall and passed through the darkness, an invisible divine soul shockwave suddenly came from the darkness. Buzz! The captain was caught off guard and suffered a heavy blow to his soul. He only felt a rumble in his mind and was stunned on the spot. Before he could come back to his senses, a large hand reached out from the darkness and grabbed his neck. The silver-armored captain was lifted up. He struggled with all his might, wanting to resist and break free, but he was powerless. He tried his best, but he could not make a sound. Only gurgling sounds came from his throat. Invisible divine soul power surged out from the large hand and violently attacked his soul. Soon, the captain's soul was shattered, and his consciousness fell into eternal darkness. Then, Ji Tianqing walked out of the darkness and possessed the captain's body. In the blink of an eye, he had become the captain of the Heaven Punisher race. Not only that, but he also took away the captain's divine soul memories. After standing in the darkness for a while, he refined the captain's memories and obtained a lot of useful information. Captain Barker? That sounds terrible. Luckily, I only need this identity for one night. Ji Tianqing muttered softly and continued to travel in the darkness, patrolling the city walls. 2 hours later, he had patrolled the city walls. He knew the distribution of the soldiers on the city walls and the number of black-armored guards like the back of his hand. Along the way, he also removed a dozen array nodes and destroyed 4 defensive arrays. No one noticed any of this. Only when the battle started and the divine arrays could not be activated would people realize that something was wrong. At midnight, Ji Tianqing took out his identity token and swaggered through the city gates into the divine capital. With Captain Barker's identity, he could do whatever he wanted in the divine capital. Other than the 4 strongest and most powerful captains, no one could restrain him. Thus, Ji Tianqing openly entered the divine palace and began his assassination journey. A silver-armored captain had just returned to his secret room to rest after a busy day of setting up the divine arrays. Whoosh! A figure suddenly appeared in the darkness in the corner of the secret room and stabbed out with a mysterious, pitch-black sword. In an instant, the captain's chest was pierced by the divine sword, and blood spurted out. On his chest, the scales with a few golden patterns were shattered, and the captain died on the spot. Even when the captain fell, he still could not die in peace. He did not know who the assassin was. 100 breaths later, Ji Tianqing used the law of space to directly pass through the thick wall, ignoring the protection of the divine arrays, and appeared in another secret room. A silver-armored captain sat cross-legged in the middle of the secret room, recuperating and quickly recovering his divine power. He sensed danger and suddenly opened his eyes, only to see a silver-armored captain in front of him. "Barker, what are you doing?" The captain furrowed his brows, looking at Ji Tianqing with both anger and confusion as he asked. However, he was answered by a pitch-black sword. Poof! The pitch-black, cold sword of burial of heaven instantly pierced through the captain's chest, and blood spurted out. Another captain died without even being able to call for help. Ji Tianqing's figure flashed and disappeared into the darkness. He went to find his next target. In the next hour, he constantly traveled through the divine palace, entering and exiting the various palaces like a ghost. One after another, the captains in the martial god realm died under his surprise attack. A total of 12 captains were killed, but no one could resist. They did not even have time to send out a signal. At the same time, Bai Long was moving silently within the walls of the divine capital. Like Ji Tianqing, he was carrying out an assassination mission. The difference was that Ji Tianqing was assassinating the captains in the divine palace. Bai Long was assassinating the captains and commanders of the black-armored guards within the city walls. As time passed, the lives of many heaven-seeking cultivators were taken away without anyone noticing. The night deepened, and the dark clouds in the sky became thicker. Chapter 2571. Soon 4 hours had passed. Dawn finally arrived, and a ray of light appeared on the horizon. The captain and the heaven-punishing guards who were guarding the divine capital finally stopped worrying and being on guard for an entire night. Many people relaxed, thinking that the darkest night was over. Daytime was approaching, and the 2 mysterious foreign race experts would not choose to attack during the day. However, just when everyone thought that this was impossible, a great battle broke out in the divine palace. The massacre had finally arrived. When Ji Tianqing used the law of space and entered a secret room to assassinate one of the captains, he sensed that something was amiss. The captain sensed the danger in advance and did not hesitate to send out a warning signal. Even though Ji Tianqing had made his move in time and killed the captain with one move, Ji Tianqing was still able to do so. However, the dark red pillar of light flew into the sky, exploding with a deafening boom that shook the area within 100 miles. In an instant, the entire divine palace and more than half of the divine capital were alarmed. Countless captains and soldiers of the divine capital were tense as they rushed to the scene of the incident with their Kenshin weapons. A great battle had unavoidably broken out. 30 captains and more than 400 soldiers of the divine capital surrounded Ji Tianxing. Sword light filled the sky, and the dazzling dark red pillar of light poured down like a flood. Ji Tianxing bathed in the red light, but he did not retreat at all. He roared angrily as his body bloomed with dazzling golden light, and he immediately transformed into a giant. He held the giant Burial of Heaven sword that was more than 1,000 feet long and started a massacre in the divine palace. He was unstoppable. Like a golden hurricane that could destroy heaven and earth, it rampaged through the divine palace and swept through the various palaces. Anyone who was touched by the golden hurricane, regardless of whether they were captains or soldiers of the divine capital, was shredded into pieces. They died without a complete corpse. Even the numerous magnificent, lofty, and dignified palaces had transformed into disorderly ruins, and the ground was covered in rubble and crushed stones. In just a few moments, more than a dozen captains and more than 200 soldiers of the divine capital died tragically under the Burial of Heaven sword. The surviving captains panicked. They roared and roared, calling for other captains to come to their aid. However, more than half of the divine palace had been destroyed. The earth-shattering sounds of battle spread throughout half of the divine capital. However, there was no sign of any captain coming to their aid. Only a few hundred soldiers of the heaven-conquering army rushed over, looking panicked. Everyone finally realized that the captains, who had never shown up, had long been assassinated. Moreover, he had died without a sound, without leaving a trace. The more than 1,000 soldiers guarding the city walls were also ambushed by a few foreign race experts. A handsome and devilishly handsome young man was leading 3 divine beasts that were as huge as mountains on a killing spree on the city wall. The more than 1,000 soldiers of the Heaven Expedition had already suffered heavy casualties. They could barely take care of themselves, so how could they still have the ability to help the divine palace? Fear and despair filled the hearts of many heaven-seeking experts, causing their morale to plummet. This earth-shattering great battle quickly entered its conclusion, becoming a great battle of pursuit. Ji Tianxing was alone. He held the Burial of Heaven sword and chased after the captains and more than 100 soldiers of the heaven-conquering army. The entire divine palace was destroyed and turned into ruins. As the battlefield shifted, the buildings and streets around the divine palace were also turned into ashes by the aftermath of the battle. Such a terrifying great battle had already woken up all the citizens in the city. Nearly 2 million citizens fled in panic, rushing toward the 4 city gates like a flood. Only a few puppets whose divine souls were controlled by the heaven-conquering army went against the flow and rushed toward the battlefield to help the heaven-conquering army. All the citizens in the city thought that the divine capital's city walls were high, the city gates were tightly shut, and there was a powerful defense divine array. Even if they fled to the city gates, they might not be able to escape the divine capital. In the end, they would definitely die in the chaotic battle. However, when they reached the city gates, they were pleasantly surprised to find that the city gates had already been destroyed. Even the towering city walls, which were hundreds of feet tall, had collapsed into ruins. One after another, gigantic and powerful divine beasts were wantonly killing the black-armored soldiers of the heaven-conquering army. The city guards and the heaven-conquering army had no time to care about themselves. They were all busy running for their lives. No one could stop the fleeing citizens. They crossed the ruined city walls like a flood and hurriedly fled the divine capital. An hour later, 90% of the citizens in the divine capital had fled. The entire divine capital had been destroyed and turned into ruins. Smoke and dust filled the sky. At this moment, the great battle finally ended. The dozens of captains guarding the divine capital had all been killed. 90% of the 2,000 heaven-conquering army soldiers had also been killed. Only a few took advantage of the chaos to escape. Ji Tianxing was very satisfied with this result. He brought Bai Long, Qianyu, Lan Kuan, and Black Dragon onto the battleship and left at lightning speed. After leaving the divine capital of the Qionghai divine nation, Tianxing's battleship headed north toward another divine nation. Along the way, the three divine beasts circulated their energy to recover and replenish their energy. In the great battle earlier, they had suffered some minor injuries and had used up a lot of their divine power. Only Ji Tianxing and Bai Long were unscathed. The divine power they had used up was quickly recovered. Bai Long steered the battleship and flew across the sky at lightning speed. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission to Ji Tianxing. "Master, I've basically figured out the situation. There are dozens of captains and 2,000 to 3,000 heaven-conquering army soldiers in the 4 divine nations of the Zero Mainland. As long as the Southern Expedition Marshal doesn't attack, and we're not surrounded by hundreds of captains, we can kill the heaven-conquering army soldiers one by one. In my opinion, we just have to change places and we'll be able to kill the 4 divine nations in 10 days. Ji Tianxing sat in the secret chamber and circulated his energy to recuperate. He closed his eyes and replied, "It's not as simple as you think. We've taken the initiative in the previous 2 attacks. When we attacked suddenly, the heaven-conquering army soldiers guarding the Falling Star and Qionghai divine nations were killed before they could even resist. However, it won't be so easy after this." Bai Long didn't think much of it. He smiled confidently and said, "Master, you're too humble. With your true immortal realm strength, you can already fight the Southern Expedition Marshal head-on. On the Zero Mainland, who could stop you? Even if it's an army of thousands, you can still kill them all and sweep everything before you. Moreover, you've also grasped the law of space. It can be said that you can come and go without a trace. It's impossible to guard against. How about this? We don't have to go through so much trouble. Don't think about the myriad Kingdom God assembly and just sweep through everything." Ji Tianxing explained calmly. "Killing the heaven-conquering army soldiers on the Zero Mainland is just to cause chaos and weaken the heaven-conquering army's core strength. We'll also restrain the heaven-conquering divine palace's expert. Our final goal isn't to kill these nobodies." Bai Long nodded and said, "I understand. Your goal is the Southern Expedition Marshal. Since it's not easy for you, we'll follow the original plan. First, we'll cause chaos on the Zero Mainland. We'll stay behind to restrain the heaven-conquering army. You can return to the heaven-conquering divine palace to assassinate the Southern Expedition Marshal." Chapter 2572. While Ji Tianxing and the others were on their way to the Flying Deity Nation, the news of the destruction of Deity's capital spread across the Zero Mainland. Coupled with the destruction of Fallen Star Deity Nation's capital city, the news of these 2 incidents shocked the world. All the heaven punishers on the mainland were filled with grief and indignation as they shared a common enemy. On the other hand, the people and martial artists of various races who had been enslaved by the heaven punishers were overjoyed. They saw the hope of regaining their freedom and worshipped the 2 mysterious powerhouses to the extreme. There were even various rumors and news spreading among the people. Some said that the 2 mysterious powerhouses were senior brothers of Heavenly Venerate Zi Shao and had been cultivating in another galaxy. After learning that Purple Cloud Planet had been invaded and Heavenly Venerate Zi Shao had fallen, the 2 powerhouses had rushed back to seek revenge. Some said that the 2 were the mysterious guardians of Purple Cloud Planet who had lived in seclusion for tens of thousands of years. The 2 guardians would not appear until it was time to change the world. Now that the calamity had descended and Purple Cloud Planet had fallen into darkness, the 2 guardians had started a massacre to revive the planet. Some said that the 2 powerhouses were already deities. They were originally the people of Purple Cloud Planet and had ascended to the upper world tens of thousands of years ago. After learning that Purple Cloud Planet was in trouble, the two deities had descended to save the people. In short, all sorts of rumors were spreading. They were strange and bizarre, making it difficult for people to tell the truth. 2 days later, Tianxing's battleship arrived at the Flying Deity Nation. The situation in the Flying Deity Nation was very tense. The dozens of martial gods guarding the various forces and cities had rushed to deity's capital. 2,000 of the black-armored guards guarding the major cities were also sent to the divine capital to meet the enemy. There were more than 70 martial god realm ship captains and 3,000 martial sage realm soldiers gathered in the holy capital, which had a radius of 300 miles. Such a powerful force was enough to make any true god tremble in fear. Even so, the sky above deity's capital was still gloomy and gloomy. In the depths of deity's capital, in the most sacred and glorious deity's palace, the atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. That was because everyone knew that those two mysterious experts of unknown origin possessed the power to destroy the heavens and earth. Even with dozens of captains and 3,000 guards, they did not have much chance of winning. At that moment, in the deity's palace conference hall, 74 captains in silver armor gathered in the main hall. Everyone stood in 3 rows, their postures very respectful. Sitting on the main seat was a general in golden armor who was at LV8 martial god realm. This person's name was Gutai, and he had always been the grand commander of the heaven-punishing divine palace. A few days ago, the news of the destruction of the fallen star's divine kingdom's capital had reached the heaven-punishing divine palace. General Dian Xing was furious and immediately found General Gutai to discuss countermeasures. General Gutai volunteered to lead 50 captains at the martial god realm to the falling star's divine kingdom to kill the mysterious expert. However, General Dian Xing was far-sighted and did not agree to Gutai's request. He guessed that the two mysterious powerhouses would flee after the attack and look for their next target. In just 3 days, the divine capital of the Changhai divine nation was destroyed and dozens of captains were killed. When the news reached the heaven-punishing divine palace, it confirmed General Dian Xing's guess. General Gutai was convinced and asked General Dian Xing how to deal with it. General Dian Xing ordered him to lead a few captains to the flying divine nation and set up an inescapable net in the divine capital. At the same time, General Dian Xing also sent 50 captains to the Han Long divine nation to protect the divine capital. He was sure that the mysterious expert's next target was either the flying divine nation or the Han Long divine nation. Last night, General Gutai arrived at the flying divine nation and entered the divine capital. The more than 60 captains guarding the divine capital were in a state of panic. The arrival of General Gutai reassured everyone, making the captains feel much more at ease. But even so, everyone's hearts were still heavy, and they were suppressed to the point that they couldn't breathe. Therefore, General Gutai gathered all the captains for a meeting in the main hall to boost their morale. Brave and fearless captains, you have proven your strength and courage by standing out from hundreds of millions of soldiers and becoming the captain of a ship. General Gutai sat boldly on his throne and spoke passionately. I believe that when a strong enemy comes, none of us will shrink back. Just 2 foreign race powerhouses are enough to make all of you so afraid? For thousands of years, we have conquered hundreds of worlds and dominated half of the purple firmament starfield. What kind of danger have we not seen? What kind of foreign race powerhouses have we not seen? Not to mention the mortal bodies, we have even killed the gods of the upper realm. General Gutai's heroic voice echoed in the main hall, inspiring the hearts of the captains. The pressure on the captains was reduced a lot. The blood in their bodies flowed faster and their hearts were filled with fighting spirit. General Gutai saw that the effect was good. All the captains showed a hopeful look. He continued, "Don't worry, everyone. With me here, those 2 foreign race beasts will not dare to invade. It would be best if they didn't know what was good for them and dared to attack Shendu. Haven't we already set up an inescapable net? We can seal those 2 foreign race beasts here and chop them into pieces. General Gutai stood up, raised his arms, and shouted loudly. The captains in the main hall were stirred up and their fighting spirit was high. However, at this moment, a figure stepped into the main hall at an untimely time. Thump, 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 an ordinary-looking warrior in black armor stepped into the main hall with heavy steps. This person lowered his head and pressed on the pitch-black battle sword at his waist. He walked straight to the middle of the main hall. Dozens of captains looked at him and sized him up with a strange look. General Gutai's speech was interrupted. He frowned and looked coldly at the black-armored guard. He scolded in a deep voice, "Bastard! Can't you see that I'm having a discussion with the captains?" Seeing that General Gutai was angry, a silver-armored captain in the crowd quickly scolded, "You blind thing, get out of here. Do you want to die?" However, the black-armored guard turned a deaf ear to him and continued to walk toward General Gutai. This scene caused countless captains to frown, and they all began to reprimand. There were even 2 captains who wanted to use their capturing techniques to take down the black-armored guard. General Gutai's eyes flashed with anger, but he remained silent for the time being. He wanted to wait for the captains to deal with the blind guard before continuing his passionate speech. However, in the next moment, something unexpected happened. The seemingly ordinary black-armored guard walked to the front of the throne. Suddenly, he raised his head and revealed a mocking sneer. "A group of people who are about to die still have the mood to boast?" As he spoke, the black-armored guard suddenly pulled out the mysterious black sword at his waist. He slashed out a dazzling golden sword light that could split heaven and earth, and attacked General Gutai. Chapter 2573. When the black-armored guard drew his sword and unleashed the dazzling golden sword radiance, General Gutai realized that there was something wrong with this person. The Heaven Punishers cultivated a special power. Both their sword radiance and sword radiance were red in color. Even if they reached the martial god realm, their power would only turn from red to purple and then to black. What the hell was the dazzling golden sword radiance? It must be an alien race. However, when General Gutai realized this, it was already too late. Boom! With a deafening sound, he was struck by the dazzling golden sword radiance. He screamed and flew backward. The incomparably violent impact caused him to shatter the throne and pierce through the thick palace walls. He flew out for thousands of meters before coming to a stop. General Gutai fell into the ruins. He struggled for a while before getting up. He felt a chill all over his body. His chest and abdomen were cold. When he looked down, he realized that there was a huge wound below his chest. His internal organs and blood gushed out of the wound and stained the ruins. Through the hideous wound, one could see the broken bones inside. General Gutai was shocked and furious. He immediately roared, "Damn bastard! I'll tear you to pieces!" However, his roar was drowned out by the loud sound coming from the meeting hall. Boom! The startled captains finally came to their senses. They realized that the black-armored guard was an alien race in disguise. They all drew their swords and sabers and were about to attack the black-armored guard. However, the black-armored guard had already used his ultimate skill and launched an attack first. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He waved his left fist and unleashed a huge shadow of a dragon elephant. It blasted toward the left side of the hall and enveloped dozens of captains. Life-Rising Sword. He held the mysterious black sword in his right hand and unleashed a giant golden sword radiance that was thousands of feet long. It slashed toward the captains on the right side of the hall. A deafening sound exploded. In the next moment, dozens of captains were sent flying to the left and right. The earth-shattering power shattered the resplendent conference hall, turning it into a pile of rubble. The entire divine palace began to tremble, and dense cracks appeared on the ground. Such a commotion alerted countless patrolling guards, as well as the soldiers of the Heaven Conqueror who were lying in ambush inside and outside the divine palace. Thousands of soldiers dressed in black armor waved their weapons and roared as they charged toward the conference hall. However, a demonic young man rushed out from the divine palaces in all directions, accompanied by 3 divine beasts that were as huge as mountains. The young man in white dragged a huge long saber, and valiantly slashed out a monstrous saber light. The 3 divine beasts also displayed their strengths, releasing ice spears, black water, and light blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, attacking the black-armored guards. Boom, 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 boom. A deafening explosion erupted, reverberating endlessly between heaven and earth. Violent shockwaves spread out, flattening dozens of palaces and affecting a radius of 100 miles. The entire divine palace was razed to the ground. Half of the divine capital was affected and turned into ruins. A great battle that shook the heavens and the earth began. General Gutai led more than 70 captains and madly besieged Ji Tianxing, his master, and the 3 divine beasts. More than 2,000 black-armored guards formed a huge encirclement outside the ruins and joined forces to release destructive attacks. Colorful and dazzling magic lights covered the entire divine capital. The destructive shockwaves soon razed the divine capital to the ground. Hundreds of thousands of civilians who did not manage to escape in time were killed by the shockwaves. More than 1 million survivors fled the divine capital in panic, scattering in all directions. This battle lasted for a full hour before it ended. The divine capital was completely destroyed. General Gutai also died under the sword of the burial of heaven, turning into ashes. 95% of the captains were killed. Only 2 of them escaped in advance and luckily survived. More than 90% of the nearly 3,000 black-armored guards were also killed. The 200 or so survivors had long since scattered and disappeared without a trace. The flames of war and smoke were still lingering in the sky, but Ji Tianxing, his master, and the 3 divine beasts had already left quietly. Not long after, the news of the divine capital's destruction spread across the continent. The civilians of various races were in an uproar again. They were so shocked that their blood surged and they were wild with excitement. In particular, General Gutai and more than 70 captains guarding the divine capital could not escape the fate of being killed. This made everyone realize that the strength of the 2 mysterious powerhouses had reached an extremely terrifying level. They must have surpassed the martial god realm and reached the true god realm. That was a true deity. As a result, the various rumors that were already widely spread on the continent became even more reasonable. The civilians of various races had been enslaved by the Heaven Punishers for a few years, and they had accumulated a great amount of resentment. In the past, they were afraid of being suppressed and did not dare to resist. Now that the gods had come to save them and killed a large number of Heaven Punishers, their resentment exploded. The morale of the civilians of various races and the various martial Dao forces was high. They spontaneously joined forces and started to resist. Therefore, countless martial artists in the various divine kingdoms rose up in revolt. Riot after riot sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain, and it was in full swing. There were not many Heaven Punishers guarding the various divine kingdoms to begin with. They also had to suppress the slaves who resisted and quell the chaos that was surging out. The Heaven Punishers were extremely busy, and they were severely lacking in manpower. They all reported to the Heaven Punishers and asked for reinforcements. The Han Long Divine Kingdom was slightly further away. When Ji Tianxing and the others arrived, it was already 3 days later. To their surprise, the divine capital of the Han Long Divine Kingdom had become an empty city. Of course, 2 million civilians and a few 100,000 slaves were still in the city. There were a few martial god realm captains and more than 200 martial sage realm guards in the city. On the surface, the divine capital looked peaceful, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. Ji Tianxing used a secret technique to sneak into the divine capital. After investigating, he discovered this. When Bai Long found out about this, he was both surprised and depressed. F***ck. Aren't the bastards of the Heaven Punishers always domineering and cool? This is their territory. They don't dare to fight and have all abandoned the city and fled? Qian Yu stretched out his paw and patted Bai Long's shoulder. He pretended to be deep and said, Xiao Bai, with your intelligence, you should have guessed this long ago. We have swept our way here and crushed 3 divine kingdoms. No matter how many martial gods and heaven punishers there were, we killed them all. The heaven punishers guarding the Han Long divine kingdom are not stupid. They are already scared out of their wits. Why would they stay and wait for death? Bai Long lifted his hand and pushed Qian Yu's paw away. He rolled his eyes and said, Little fox, what do you think we should do? Qian Yu revealed his signature sly smile and said meaningfully, What we do next will depend on what old Ji thinks. However, based on my understanding of him, he will return to the heaven punishers alone. We will stay and cause trouble in the Han Long divine kingdom. We will assassinate the heaven punishers and attract their attention. Chapter 2574. Qian Yu had just revealed a smug smile when the white dragon rolled its eyes at it. Do I even need you to guess? Didn't I already tell you? Then, he cupped his fists at Ji Tianxing and said, Master, don't worry and return to the deity Punisher Palace. Leave the rest to us. We'll definitely turn the Han Long divine nation upside down and shock the entire Zero mainland. To his surprise, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and interrupted him. Don't worry. There are still 20 days until the Myriad Kingdoms Divine Assembly. I still have to create a bigger storm. The Han Long divine nation already has dozens of martial gods. Adding the men sent by General Dian Xing, there should be more than 100 of them. There will be 3 to 5 generals among them who are at least 7th-level martial gods. They won't really give up on the divine capital. They'll just hide in the dark and wait for us to show up before attacking. With your strength, you'll most likely die if you let your guard down and get surrounded by the deity punishers. Although White Dragon was very confident in his strength, he did not refute. However, he didn't refute Ji Tianxing's analysis and judgment. Master, you mean the captains and more than 200 black-armored guards in the divine capital are bait left behind by the deity punishers? If that's the case, what should we do? Ji Tianxing nodded and pointed at the divine capital. He said, If they don't want to fight, we'll find a way to force them to fight. If they want to surround us, we'll set up an ambush here and catch them all in one fell swoop. White Dragon and Qian Yu thought for a moment and immediately understood what he meant. Soon, they sneaked into the divine capital and began their operation. After a night, they had set up 2 powerful divine arrays under the divine capital. One of them was the 1,000-sword execution formation and the other was the 9-development space shattering formation. Both of them were true god-level formations. After they were set up, Ji Tianxing began to assassinate the captains in the city, while White Dragon went to kill the black-armored guards. Early in the morning, the sun rose slowly. The captains in the Divine Palace were quickly killed by Ji Tianxing. More than half of the black-armored guards guarding the city gates were also slaughtered by White Dragon and the 3 divine beasts. The commotion caused by the battle was so great that it woke up all the people in the divine capital. Countless people panicked and rushed toward the city gate, wanting to escape from the divine capital. White Dragon and the 3 divine beasts followed Ji Tianxing's instructions and opened the 4 city gates. In just 2 hours, over 1 million civilians had been evacuated. Only a few of the puppets whose souls had been controlled by the heaven punishers remained in the divine capital. They fearlessly surrounded Ji Tianxing, Bai Long, and the others. Without a doubt, these puppets were quickly killed. The battle soon stopped, and the chaotic divine capital gradually calmed down. More than half of the divine palace had been destroyed. The 4 city gates and several sections of the city wall had also been reduced to rubble. Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven and stood at the highest point of the divine palace. He looked down at the entire divine capital and waited silently. The White Dragon and the 4 divine beasts were hiding in various parts of the city, quietly accumulating power. About an hour later, a large black shadow appeared in the sky around the divine capital. There were at least 100 black battleships coming from all directions like rolling black clouds. The battleships were as fast as lightning. In a short while, they had surrounded the divine capital. All the battleships opened their side decks, revealing black cannons that were aimed at the city. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More than 100 captains in silver armor stepped out of the battleships and flew into the sky above the divine capital. There were 4 people in the lead. All of them wore dark golden armor and their auras were imposing and domineering. Without a doubt, these were 4 powerful generals. A total of 130 captains surrounded Ji Tianqing under the lead of the 4 generals. All of them had smug, ferocious smiles on their faces. Their eyes were filled with murderous intent. The 4 generals in the lead sized up Ji Tianqing and laughed smugly. There are rumors all over the continent that you are some kind of deity who has come down to earth. I didn't expect you to be so weak. Ha 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 ha. You little b*****. Our efforts were not in vain. You are finally here. Hee. You lowly worm. You will not be able to escape this time. You are going to die. You little b*****. You have killed so many of my people. Today I will cut you into 1,000 pieces. The 4 generals were smug as if victory was within their grasp. The truth was just as Ji Tianqing had guessed. This was a trap that the elites had set up. They had pretended to abandon the city and escape, leaving only a few captains behind to act as bait. When Ji Tianqing and the rest of the people entered the divine capital, they had already gathered all the captains and warriors to surround the divine capital. This way, they would have the upper hand and would be able to fight Ji Tianqing and the rest of the people. The 4 generals and the captains were full of confidence as they fantasized about how they would torture and kill Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing looked calm. He glanced at the crowd and said regretfully, "You have planned for so long and you have only gathered so few people? This is so disappointing." The number of Einherjar realm elites was similar to what he had estimated. The people in the lead were also just 4 generals. There was not even a single true God realm powerhouse. This indeed made Ji Tianqing feel somewhat regretful. Initially, he had thought that General Dian Xing would come personally and he would be able to use this opportunity to kill him. When the 4 generals saw his reaction, they frowned and their hearts skipped a beat. This little b**** has obviously fallen into our trap and is surrounded by us. How can he be so calm? No. We have so many people, and we have the support of the fleet. There is no reason for him to not be afraid. How can he be so arrogant? This guy must be bluffing. He must be terrified, but he doesn't dare to show it. That is why he is acting so arrogant. Similar thoughts flashed through the minds of the 4 generals. Ji Tianqing said coldly, "If you have any other tricks up your sleeves, why don't you use them all at once? If not, you won't have the chance." As he spoke, his body emitted dazzling golden light and he turned into a giant that was 100 feet tall. Even the sword of burial of heaven in his hand had turned into a giant sword that was 100 feet long. It shone with a cold black light. Endless murderous intent and violent aura exploded from his body and swept across the entire fairy's capital. The 4 generals panicked as they were suppressed by his aura. They were terrified and uneasy. "Quick! Kill him! Let's attack together and tear him into pieces! Don't let him escape!" Subconsciously, the 4 generals let out a furious roar and pulled out their swords, spears, swords, and halberds. They slashed out sharp red light blades that filled the sky and attacked Ji Tianqing together. The expressions of the 100 or so captains changed drastically as well. They hurriedly brandished their swords and unleashed their ultimate killing moves to attack Ji Tianqing. Thousands of red light blades, like a flood that blotted out the sky, instantly engulfed Ji Tianqing. No one could withstand the combined attack of 100 Einherjar realm elite. Not even a true god. Chapter 2575. They watched as Ji Tianqing was drowned by the overwhelming torrent. Even if he did not die, he would be severely injured. However, at this critical moment, an unbelievable scene occurred. Swoosh! His figure suddenly became blurry, leaving only an afterimage. His real body was nowhere to be found. The sky was filled with saber light and sword shadows slashed down, shattering the afterimage into pieces. Then, endless red light blades slashed into the divine palace. Rumble! The entire divine palace collapsed on the spot, turning into ruins. Smoke and dust flew up into the sky. Not only the divine palace, but the ground within a radius of 100 miles also collapsed, revealing a huge pit. Half of the divine capital was destroyed. Tens of thousands of houses and palaces were turned into debris. The combined attack of so many experts was so destructive. However, the 4 generals and more than 100 captains all frowned and looked around sharply. Whether in the sky or in the ruins, there was no trace of Ji Tianqing. Many captains were puzzled and started whispering to each other. "Strange, where did that little bastard go? Could it be that he was killed by us in an instant and turned into ashes? Isn't he a true god expert? How could he be so weak and be killed by us in one move? So what if he's a true god? With so many of us working together, we can even kill a true god, right?" Just as everyone was discussing, a huge golden figure appeared out of thin air outside the encirclement. Sword sweeping all directions. The golden giant roared with a thunderous voice. He held the huge sword with both hands and slashed down. Suddenly, more than 100 golden swords bloomed and shrouded the figures of more than 30 captains. Bam! 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 With a series of muffled explosions, more than 30 captains exploded on the spot. Their bodies turned into a rain of blood. The 4 generals and more than 100 captains suddenly widened their eyes, revealing an extremely horrified expression. "Oh my God! How could he be safe and sound and escape from the encirclement? This is impossible! More than 100 of us worked together and destroyed the area he was in. Even the alternate space was shattered. How could he teleport and escape? What method did he use? Is he really only a true god?" These thoughts flashed through everyone's minds at the same time. The 4 generals were the first to come back to their senses. They hurriedly waved their palms and shot out a red light that soared into the sky, forming a few patterns. That was the signal to attack. In the sky 100 miles away, more than 100 battleships saw the attack signal and activated their formations without hesitation, firing their divine cannons. Boom, 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 boom. All the battleships simultaneously blasted out hundreds of dark red light pillars, which instantly pierced through the sky and headed straight for Ji Tianqing. More than 10,000 light pillars covered the sky for 300 miles, covering the entire divine capital. Ji Tianqing's aura had been locked onto by the divine cannon. Logically speaking, there was no way for him to escape. As long as he was struck by over 10,000 light pillars, even if he was a peak true god, he would die without a doubt. However, a scene that caused everyone to be even more shocked appeared. When more than 10,000 light pillars were about to drown him, his figure blurred again and disappeared into thin air. Boom, 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 boom. In the next moment, the pillars of light collided with each other, causing a loud bang that shook the clouds to reverberate endlessly between heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing's figure was destroyed, but his real body was nowhere to be found. Destructive shockwaves spread out in all directions and engulfed the entire divine capital. In the blink of an eye, the entire divine capital had been razed to the ground, causing smoke and dust to rise into the air. 4 generals and more than 100 captains were also sent flying by the shockwaves and scattered in all directions. Before they could recover from their shock, a golden light suddenly shot up into the sky from the ruins. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The dazzling golden light shot up into the sky and immediately formed a light shield that covered the entire sky. It was like a giant bowl with a radius of 300 miles that was placed upside down on the ruins of divine capital, suppressing all the battleships and experts of the Heaven Punisher. The golden light shield was very thick, like an indestructible fortress. After the array was activated, it released a terrifying force that suppressed the entire space. The Heaven Punisher battleships that were floating in the sky suddenly fell down like dumplings and landed heavily on the ruins. More than 100 captains and 4 generals were also suppressed in the ruins, struggling with great difficulty. This sudden turn of events caused many experts to be inexplicably shocked. A bad premonition arose in their hearts. D*Eminent, that B** starred, has set up a divine array in the city. He is too despicable. We were supposed to ambush him, but now we have fallen into his trap. Everyone, don't panic. This is only a sealing array. As long as we remain calm, we will be able to break it. The 4 generals calmed down and shouted loudly, stabilizing the morale of the army. However, what happened next caused them to break down completely. Tens of thousands of golden light swords formed in the golden light shield that covered the entire sky, exuding a sharp and violent energy fluctuation. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. More than 90,000 golden light swords were arranged in a mysterious way and started to fly around, killing the Heaven Punisher battleships and experts. Instantly, the area within a radius of 300 miles was covered by the golden light. The sword radiance flashed and intertwined with each other, cutting the sky into pieces and crushing the ground into powder. Every battleship would be slashed by more than 1,000 sword radiances within a breath's time. Every martial god realm captain was engulfed by the golden sword radiances and suffered endless attacks. Bam! 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 The Heaven Punisher battleships were slashed into pieces by the sword radiances and exploded. There were dozens to hundreds of fully armed black armor guards in each battleship. When the battleships were slashed into pieces by the sword radiances, most of the black armor guards were not spared and were crushed into pieces. A few survivors fell from the sky, but before they could land on the ground, they were crushed into pieces by the sword radiances. Not only were the battleships destroyed, but even the martial god realm captains could not withstand the sword radiances. Bam! 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 In just 10 breaths, more than 30 captains had been crushed into pieces. The remaining captains were also covered in wounds and broken limbs, but they were still holding on in desperation. Even the 4 generals were in a miserable state. Their flesh and bones were torn apart by the sword radiances, and they were covered in blood. Everyone was terrified. Their hearts were filled with fear and despair. They roared and charged toward the golden light barrier, trying to escape the divine capital. However, Bai Long and the 3 divine beasts charged out. They rampaged in the sky and started a massacre. Ji Tianxing's figure was also flickering. He killed one captain after another with his sword. The world was in chaos. Bright and dazzling golden light mixed with the blood that filled the sky, outlining a strange scene. In just 15 minutes, the god-killing sword formation stopped working. All the battleships, captains, and black armor guards were killed. None of them were spared. Only 3 generals were still alive. However, their bodies were broken and they were on the verge of death. Chapter 2576. The 3 generals stood in the sky, blood gushing out of their bodies. They looked down at the ground below, their eyes filled with despair. The once glorious divine capital had long since disappeared. It had turned into a huge crater. The pit was filled with dust and gravel. Silver armor fragments and black warship wreckage were scattered around. Everything was over. Their meticulously planned scheme had been crushed just like that. 130 warships, their captains, and more than 3,000 soldiers of the heavenly expedition had been reduced to ashes. Such a heavy blow had never been dealt before. The facts had proven that the white-robed foreign race expert was unbelievably powerful. Other than a true god, no one could subdue him. Even if more than 100 martial gods worked together, it would be useless. The three generals knew that they were going to die, so they gave up on the idea of escaping. They used their last bit of divine power to self-destruct. However, Ji Tianxing waved his hand and activated the second array. 9 development space, shattering array. Swoosh. White light surged out of the deep pit that had a radius of 200 miles, forming a huge tornado that engulfed the three generals. That white tornado was condensed from the power of space, and it could cut and destroy everything. The three generals were instantly killed. Their bodies disintegrated into millions of dust particles and dissipated into the air. However, the tornado did not dissipate. It continued to destroy everything in the ruins. The armor fragments of the captains and the wreckage of the warships were all reduced to dust by the tornado. Ji Tianxing did not take another look. He left with White Dragon and the 3 divine beasts. When they stepped onto Tianxing's warship and left, the tornado had already wiped out all traces and gradually dissipated. The divine capital of the Han Long divine nation was destroyed. Not even the broken walls were left. Only a huge pit was left. More than 100 captains and thousands of soldiers of the heavenly expedition, including the 4 generals, were all killed. The news spread like wildfire and quickly spread across the Zero mainland. The surviving experts of the heavenly expedition in the 4 divine nations had completely collapsed. They were all panicking. No one knew when the butcher's knife would fall on their head. The civilians of the major races and forces, on the other hand, were overjoyed and excited. 80% of the Heaven Punisher experts guarding the 4 divine kingdoms had been killed. The remaining experts of the Heaven's Path had also become birds that were startled by the mere twang of a bow. They were already unable to take care of themselves. The people of various countries rose up in revolt, erupting with an even more intense wave of resistance. They swore to break free from the Heaven Punisher's slavery and regain their freedom. For a time, the flames of war broke out everywhere on the Zero continent, setting the prairie ablaze. Even though the heaven-punishing divine palace had received the news and sent out a large number of heaven-punishing warriors led by hundreds of captains, they did not go to suppress the chaos in the various countries. The captains and soldiers of the Heaven Expedition were ordered to search for the traces of the mysterious elite. They swore to find him. After all, the 2 mysterious powerhouses had gone missing after the battle in the Han Long Divine Kingdom. 5 whole days passed, and the mysterious expert did not show his face again. At the same time, White Dragon, Blue Kuan, Qianyu, and Black Dragon had already left the Zero mainland. Under Ji Tianxing's instructions, they crossed the incomparably dangerous Sky Sea and arrived at another continent. Next, they would carry out an assassination on that continent. They could weaken the core strength of the Heaven Punisher and restrain the experts of the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace. Ji Tianxing had also returned to the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace. He disguised himself as a black-armored guard and infiltrated the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace to secretly gather information. The current Heaven Punisher Divine Palace was not as heavily guarded as before. An invisible heavy atmosphere pervaded the palace. A layer of haze shrouded the hearts of all the experts of the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace. They were filled with grief, indignation, and helplessness. General Dian Xing was also busy and did not have time to care about the defenses of the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace. He had even put aside the matter of the 10,000 Countries God Conference. In order to search for the 2 foreign race experts, he had sent out more than 100 captains and more than 1,000 Heaven Punisher Divine Palace soldiers. The Heaven Punisher Divine Palace's defenses had been reduced by half. However, the most infuriating thing was that no matter how General Dian Xing deployed his troops, he could not find any trace of the mysterious expert. The atmosphere in the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace was stifling. Even the experts of various races participating in the 10,000 Countries God Conference could feel that something was amiss. More than 150 experts from various great worlds had been kneeling outside the conference hall with their hands raised high above their head. For half a month, No one dared to leave their original spot or make a ruckus. However, everyone saw the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace's experts entering and leaving with anxious and gloomy expressions. Naturally, they knew that something big had happened. Although everyone did not show it on their faces, they were secretly discussing this matter. Doesn't everyone feel that the atmosphere in the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace is becoming more and more strange? That's right. Those captains and guards used to be so arrogant and full of themselves. Now they are all dejected and depressed. I don't know if anyone has noticed that the number of people entering and leaving the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace has decreased by half over the past 10 days. Humph. Looking at the unlucky faces of those bastards, I know that they are in trouble. Yesterday, I heard from a few guards that General Dian Xing was furious and sent out another 20 captains to look for something. The Purple Cloud Planet is the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace's territory. What has happened to make the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace so nervous? Could it be that the people of the Purple Cloud Planet have joined forces to fight back against the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace's enslavement? The martial gods from different worlds carefully communicated with one another. God Lord Silvermoon expressionlessly kneeled on the ground, her hands holding a treasure box above her head. She could hear the discussions of the people around her. Even though she only understood part of it, she could also sense that the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace was in trouble. When she thought of this, she couldn't help but think of that white figure, that arrogant and conceited human youth. That detestable fellow. Ever since I recognized him while he was pretending to be a guard, he hasn't shown his face again. Half a month has passed, and I wonder what he's doing? Could the trouble the Heaven Punisher Divine Palace have encountered have something to do with him? God Lord Silvermoon's thoughts were running wild as she speculated. At this moment, a group of black-armored Heaven Punisher guards walked over from the distance. The martial gods immediately went on guard and shut their mouths to maintain their silence. God Lord Silvermoon heard the footsteps and instinctively turned to look. Her gaze swept across the guards and landed on the last black-armored guard. Suddenly, a glint flashed in her eyes. It's him. He's finally appeared again. This thought flashed through God Lord Silvermoon's mind. At the same time, the black-armored guard raised his head and calmly looked at her. As their eyes met, God Lord Silvermoon could clearly sense the encouragement in his eyes. God Lord Silvermoon's heart warmed, and she couldn't help but send a message. Hey! Where have you been for the last half a month? Chapter 2577. Only she and the guard could hear God Lord Silvermoon's voice transmission. The black-armored guard expressionlessly walked across the plaza toward the conference hall. At the same time, he messaged in the language of the moon spirit race. I'm not called Hey. I'm Tianxing. God Lord Silvermoon angrily glared at him and messaged back. You're still fussing about this at a time like this? Let me ask you, what in the world happened to the Heaven Punishing race to make them so nervous? And where have you been all this time? Does the Heaven Punishing race matter have anything to do with you? Ji Tianxing was forced to admit that God Lord Silvermoon's intuition and judgment were very accurate. He had no intention of hiding the truth, so he straightforwardly said, I personally went to the Zero Continent and killed 80% of the heaven-punishing experts guarding the 4 divine kingdoms. What? God Lord Silvermoon's body trembled, her eyes going so wide that they almost fell out of their sockets. But she quickly came back to her senses and restrained her shock. She messaged, Scoundrel, will you die if you don't brag? What's going on? Hurry and speak. As the two conversed, Ji Tianxing and the guard passed through the crowd and onto the step. He pretended not to hear God Lord Silvermoon's question, nor did he explain. God Lord Silvermoon stared at his back as he entered the conference hall, but she still did not get an answer, causing her to become rather angry. That damn scoundrel! Not a word of truth comes out of his mouth. How could I have been so obsessed that I believed his words? God Lord Silvermoon silently cursed, both regretful and angry. But once she calmed down, she couldn't help but think back to Ji Tianqing's words. She repeated those words over and over in her mind several times. After thinking for a few moments, she hesitated, thinking to herself, that scoundrel's tone and eyes didn't seem like he was bragging at all. It seemed like he was telling the truth. Could he really be telling the truth? Did he really go to the Zero Continent and slaughter countless heaven-punishing experts? How could that be? The Zero Continent is the territory of the heaven-punishing race, and has as many experts as the Cloud. But his origins are mysterious, his strength is formidable, and he has all sorts of divine abilities and methods. Perhaps it really is possible. The more God Lord Silvermoon thought about it, the more confused he became. He didn't dare to believe it, but he was also somewhat expectant. She was forced to the point where her heart itched unbearably. She couldn't wait to rush into the great council hall, grab Ji Tianqing, and interrogate him face to face. However, reason prevailed over impulse. She gradually suppressed her complicated thoughts and continued to kneel in the square, waiting silently. About a quarter of an hour later, several black-armored guards left the main hall and strode over the stairs. Upon seeing Ji Tianqing come out, God Lord Silvermoon hastily raised his head, a look of anticipation in his eyes. Without waiting for Ji Tianqing to walk in, she secretly asked, "Tianqing, is what you said just now true? How many heaven punishers have you killed? How did he do it?" Ji Tianqing walked through the crowd without looking sideways. When he walked past her, he said indifferently, "I just received the news that the Southern Expedition Marshal will be back soon. You have to get ready." "Me? Get ready?" God Lord Silvermoon froze for a moment, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Hey, what are you planning? What do I need to get ready for?" By the time she came back to her senses and messaged Ji Tianqing again, Ji Tianqing was long gone. God Lord Silvermoon's brows creased as she clenched her teeth in anger. In the moon spirit world, she was a peerlessly noble God Lord, an omniscient and omnipotent God. But in front of Ji Tianqing, she felt like her intelligence had been completely suppressed, and even her temper had become much more explosive. But it was precisely this that made her even more unconvinced, and she vowed to see Ji Tianqing's true face. Night fell. The resplendent heaven-punishing divine palace was shrouded in darkness, its luster much dimmer. The divine palace was extremely quiet, with only a few places lit by lanterns. The number of patrolling guards had decreased by half, making the divine palace even more desolate. Deep within the divine palace, in a simple and elegant study, General Dian Xing stood in front of the window with his arms crossed in front of his chest. He was staring at the sea of clouds outside the window, waiting quietly. He was the only one in the study, and it was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. At this moment, a black silhouette shot out of the clouds and into the study. Whoosh! The blurry silhouette immediately became solid, revealing a tall and dignified heaven-punishing man. This man was pitch black and had no scales on his chest, but his body exuded powerful ripples of energy. Only true God heaven-punishing experts could reconstruct their divine bodies and hide the scales on their chests within their bodies. In this way, they would have one less fatal weakness. General Pointing Star was startled out of his stupor and turned to the middle-aged man. Upon seeing this man's face, General Pointing Star hurriedly bowed, a look of respect on his face. "Your subordinate pays respects to the Grand Marshal." There was no doubt that this middle-aged man was the Southern conquering marshal. After so many years, his injuries had long since healed, and his strength had also returned to peak condition. He coldly stared at General Pointing Star and sternly said, "My race has occupied Violet Firmament Star for several years, and the situation has long since stabilized. Why did such a thing happen and turn the Zero mainland upside down?" Clearly, Marshal Nanjianan had ended his seclusion early and returned to the heaven-punishing divine palace because of the Zero mainland. General Pointing Star had already expected Marshal Nanjianan to be furious. Bearing the anger and pressure of the South conquering general, He hurriedly bowed and said in fear and trepidation, "It's my fault. I didn't manage them well enough. I let the two non-humankind beings wander around and create chaos. Your subordinate is incompetent, please punish me." Marshal Nanjinan said expressionlessly, "The four divine nations, more than 300 captains, and more than 10,000 elite warriors were all killed. In the end, you did not even know who the two foreign race experts were. Pointing star, if Ben Shui does not kill you, how will he answer to the warriors who died?" The lowly people of the Zero mainland rose up and rebelled, causing the entire continent to fall into chaos. If Ben Shui does not kill you, how will he convince the people and lead the entire star field in the future? Hearing these words, General Dian Xing's body trembled, and he fell to his knees with a plop. "Marshal, please calm down. It's not that your subordinate is lazy, but the strength of the two foreign race experts is beyond imagination. During the battle at Han Long's divine capital, your subordinate planned and mobilized 130 captains and 4 generals to besiege the two foreign race experts in the ruins. However, no one expected the two foreign race experts to kill the 4 generals and all the captains, and destroy all the warship. The leading white-robed youth was unharmed, and only the youth was lightly injured. Marshal, those are 2 true God Realm powerhouses. Only you personally taking action can kill them." Hearing this, the southern conquering marshal said with a cold expression, "Dian Xing, I'll spare your life for now. If you do not kill the 2 foreign race experts within a month, Ben Shui will execute you in front of everyone." Chapter 2578. Hearing Marshal Nan's words, General Dian Xing hurriedly kowtowed and thanked him as if he had been pardoned. After crawling to his feet, he asked carefully, "Marshal, I have sent out 150 captains to search for them all over the continent. What do you think we should do next?" Marshal Nan frowned again and asked in a low voice, "How many captains and guards are left in the God Palace?" General Dian Xing paused for a moment before replying, "Only 200 captains and 1,000 elite guards." Marshal Nan cursed angrily, "Idiot! How could you send out half of the captains and guards guarding the God Palace? The defense of the God Palace is so weak. If those 2 alien powerhouses came to sneak attack, how could they resist? If Ben Shui hadn't come back in time, wouldn't the God Palace have been razed to the ground?" General Dian Xing had never thought of this. He exclaimed in disbelief, "Marshal, how is this possible? No matter how daring those 2 alien bastards are, they wouldn't dare to come to the God Palace." Marshal Nan scolded angrily, "They've already killed so many captains and guards and disturbed the entire Zero continent. Why wouldn't they dare?" General Dian Xing's face stiffened. He explained embarrassedly, "Marshal, you're guarding the God Palace. If those 2 alien bastards dare to invade, wouldn't they be walking right into a trap?" This flattery, which wasn't too subtle, made Marshal Nan's anger dissipate a lot. He waved his hand with a dark face and said, "No need to talk nonsense. Send the order immediately to strengthen the patrol and defense. In addition, the Myriad Kingdoms God Conference will be held tomorrow." General Dian Xing frowned and said tentatively, "Marshal, please forgive me for acting on my own initiative and holding this Myriad Kingdoms God Conference. I did this to show the powerful force of our race and highlight your divine majesty. However, the God Conference is scheduled to be held half a month later. Isn't it too hasty to hold it half a month earlier?" Marshal Nan stared at him and said in a dignified tone, "It's just a claptrap. What's the point? Can't you tell what's more important in the face of danger?" General Dian Xing was scolded badly. He hurriedly nodded and apologized. However, he had some doubts in his heart. He thought to himself, even if those 2 alien race experts are very powerful, killing a large number of captains and guards, and disrupting the Zero mainland, they are still very powerful. However, wasn't the Grand Marshal's reaction a little too cautious? Not only had he left the Purple Heaven Cave in advance, but he had also played along with the myriad kingdoms God assembly. He was also wary of those two experts. How could this be? Could it be that the Grand Marshal doesn't have the confidence to kill those two foreign race experts? At the thought of this, General Dian Xing's heart skipped a beat, and he felt a chill down his spine. He had a bad feeling in the depths of his soul. We have just occupied the Purple Cloud Star, and our soldiers have suffered heavy casualties. We need to rest and recuperate. I hope that the Grand Marshal will be able to resolve this matter smoothly. Don't let anything go wrong. General Pointing Star prayed silently in his heart. Then, he calmed himself down and bid farewell to Marshal Jinan. After walking out of the study, he went to the meeting hall and gathered many captains to pass on the order of the Southern Expedition Marshal. Standing at the door of the meeting hall, he glanced outside the hall. On the square below the stairs, more than 100 alien race experts were still kneeling on the ground, holding the treasure box above their heads with both hands. Seeing this, General Pointing Star felt slightly comforted. He thought to himself, our race can occupy hundreds of worlds. We can definitely rule the entire Purple Cloud Star Zone. So what if they are just two true God stage alien race experts? Then, he turned and stepped into the meeting hall. Bathed in the dim light, he walked to the main seat. Men, pass on my order. Gather all the captains for a meeting. As he walked to the main seat, General Pointing Star waved his hand and called the black armored guard in the corner. A black armored guard immediately walked out from the dark corner. With his hand on the hilt of the sword at his waist, he walked toward General Pointing Star. General Pointing Star frowned when he saw this guard walking toward him instead of passing on the order. He scolded somewhat angrily, "Are you deaf? Can't you hear me?" The black armored guard turned a deaf ear to him and continued walking toward him with his head lowered. General Pointing Star was already in a bad mood. Seeing the black armored guard being so rude, a ray of cold light flashed across his eyes. He raised his hand and slapped at him. "Rude bastard, how dare you ignore my order? You are courting death." A dark red palm shadow the size of a millstone slapped toward the black armored guard with a terrifying force. Then, something unexpected happened. The black armored guard suddenly raised his head and revealed a sneer on his face. His eyes were especially piercing and mocking. Clang! The black armored guard instantly drew out his mysterious black sword and slashed out a dark golden sword light toward General Pointing Star. Bow! The dark red palm shadow was shattered by the sword light, and there was a sound like a bubble bursting. The sword light's power did not decrease. Like a phantom, it split the air and hit General Pointing Star. Boom! General Pointing Star was caught off guard. His face was still filled with shock as he spat out blood and flew backward. Boom! With a loud bang, General Dian Xing broke 2 pillars in succession before falling into the main hall. He rolled on the ground for more than 10 times before he rolled to the door. The sword light slashed the ground and tore out a 1,000-foot-long trench that extended to the stairs outside the hall. Countless pebbles and wood shavings fell from the roof and landed in the main hall. General Pointing Star crawled up pathetically. He only felt that his chest was cold. He looked down and realized that there was a hideous wound on his chest that extended all the way to his abdomen. Dark red blood gushed out of the wound like spring water and sprinkled on the main hall. Through the wound, one could see his internal organs and broken bones. The heart-wrenching pain made General Pointing Star tremble. He was shocked and angry. He stared at the black armored guard in disbelief and shouted with a hoarse voice, "Bastard! Not a warrior of our race, but a foreign race." The dark golden sword light and the strength of a true god were the best proof. After shouting, General Pointing Star suddenly came to his senses. Recalling what Marshal Nanjinan had just said, his body suddenly stiffened, and his face was filled with horror. It's that foreign race elite? Marshal Nan had mentioned before that the defense of the God Palace was weak. If the foreign race elite took the opportunity to invade, wouldn't they destroy the God Palace? General Pointing Star did not take it to heart. He only felt that it was ridiculous. In his opinion, no matter how strong and arrogant the foreign race elite was, they would not dare to come to the heaven-punishing God Palace to die. However, he did not expect Marshal Nan's words to come true. The foreign race elite that had wreaked havoc in the Zero mainland and killed countless captains and guards had really infiltrated the heaven-punishing God Palace. Download address. Mobile reading. Chapter 2579. General Dian Xing did not expect the other party to be so audacious. After confirming the other party's identity, he quickly raised his right palm and shot out a beam of dark red light as a warning signal. However, before the dark red signal could fly out of the main hall, it was destroyed by a beam of golden sword radiance. In the next moment, the black armored guard disappeared into thin air. Whoosh! When he appeared again, he had teleported thousands of feet away and was behind General Dian Xing's swoosh. The mysterious black sword pierced through the back of General Dian Xing's head, releasing a bone-chilling black light. The speed of the sword was extremely fast, comparable to the speed of light. General Dian Xing's emotions fluctuated too much. He was caught off guard and was severely injured. His strength also decreased. As a result, he could not dodge the fatal sword. Bam! The mysterious black sword shattered General Point Star's protective divine power and pierced through the black scales on his head, directly penetrating his brain. The blade pierced through the back of General Dian Xing's head and came out of his forehead, causing blood to spurt out. The violent sword chi exploded in his head and instantly blasted his head into smithereens. A rain of blood burst out and splashed in the main hall. General Dian Xing's head was gone and only his muscular body was left. Even so, he did not die on the spot. His headless body turned around and fled without hesitation. He ran out of the main hall as fast as lightning. He was terrified. He knew that he could not defeat the other party. He only wanted to escape from the main hall and seek help from Marshal Nan. However, the black-armored guard's figure flashed and chased him out of the main hall. The mysterious black sword released a beam of golden light again and shot out a dazzling beam of sword radiance. It was as if the golden sun had appeared again, dispelling the darkness of the night and illuminating the night sky. Bam! The golden sword struck General Pointing Star, splitting him into two halves from the middle. Blood spurted out. It was a ghastly sight under the golden light. However, what was more frightening was that General Dian Xing did not die even though he had lost his head and was split in half. The two halves of his body separated and fled to the left and right. As expected of a true immortal from the Heaven Punisher. His vitality is indeed strong. The black-armored guard murmured. His left hand struck out an illusory image of a dragon elephant, while his right hand slashed out a dazzling sword light. With two loud bangs, the two halves of General Pointing Star's body were blasted into pieces and scattered on the steps outside the palace. General Dian Xing was completely blasted into smithereens. This was a true death. Moreover, the dragon elephant phantom and the sword light contained the 9 heavens' divine fire, which burned the flesh into ashes. As a result, General Pointing Star had completely disappeared, and there was no possibility of him being resurrected. In the square outside the palace, more than 100 alien race martial gods knelt on the ground and witnessed this scene with their own eyes. When everyone heard the sounds of fighting in the hall, they all looked up. Then, they saw an unforgettable scene. The headless General Point Star tried his best to escape, but he was cut in half by the black-armored guard. Then, before the two halves could escape, they were blasted into smithereens. Everyone's eyes widened as they were filled with shock. No one could have thought that the true God Realm General Pointing Star was actually killed by someone so effortlessly. Furthermore, the person who had attacked him was a guard from the Heaven Punishing clan. This was far too bizarre. The alien race martial gods were all flabbergasted, their minds blank. Only God Lord Silvermoon was able to maintain his clarity of mind and see the truth. It's him. He actually attacked ahead of time. The true God Realm General Pointing Star was so easily killed by him? Just who is he? How could he be so terrifyingly strong? From the looks of it, everything he said before was true? Countless thoughts flashed through God Lord Silvermoon's mind, and his heart began to beat faster. At this moment, a furious roar came from the depths of the divine palace. Vile creature, die! As that thunderous roar came from the depths of the divine palace, a figure wrapped in red light flew out. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, that muscular figure descended from the heavens, both fists punching at the black-armored guard at the entrance. There was no doubt that this was the Southern Vanquishing Marshal. Even though General Pointing Star had not sent a signal before his death, the Southern Vanquishing Marshal had still been alarmed. After all, the battle just now had caused quite a stir, and more than half of the conference hall had collapsed. Boom! At this critical moment, the black-armored guard raised his left fist, unleashing the image of a golden dragon and elephant that clashed with the Southern Vanquishing Marshal's attack. Along with the earth-shattering explosion, violent airwaves exploded and instantly knocked down the alien race martial gods who were kneeling outside the palace. Everyone was sent flying backward, vomiting blood as they rolled across the plaza. The conference hall was also destroyed and turned into ruins. The several dozen black-armored guards on the steps outside were also obliterated by the shockwave. A deep crater was left in the ground, obscuring the night sky in a cloud of dust. The terrifying shockwave caused the ground to tremble, and the plaza was riddled with cracks. In a clash between true gods, even the shockwaves from their battle could destroy the world. The hundred-some alien race martial gods all retreated in shock to the edge of the plaza. Their gazes pierced through the darkness and fell upon the ruins. Two experts stood in the night sky, facing off against each other from 10,000 feet away. The expert on the left was a human youth dressed in white robes. This was his true body. The black-armored guard from before had only been a disguise. A white robe, a black sword, and waist-length black hair fluttered in the night wind. He was like a lofty mountain, his body exuding a supreme majesty that looked down on all living beings. The alien race martial gods stared at him, their eyes brimming with shock, worship, and excitement. God Lord Silvermoon, in particular, was so excited that his blood was boiling, his eyes shining. The Southern Vanquishing Marshal on the right was a muscular heaven-conquering expert with a pitch-black body and a head of dark red hair. He held a blood-red halberd in both hands, and his body was wreathed in dark red flames. He looked like a god of death who had walked out of hell. An invisible pressure and killing intent engulfed the entire divine palace, and the alien race martial gods didn't dare to look directly at him, fear welling up in their hearts. These two experts were gods who had surpassed the martial god realm and truly stepped into the divine Tao. "It's you, Ji Tianxing." The Southern Vanquishing Marshal stared at the white-robed youth, and when he recognized him, his pupils constricted and his face paled. Ji Tianxing calmly stared at him, a mocking smile on his lips. "Southern Vanquishing Marshal, I went to great lengths to cross half a star zone to find you. Are you very touched?" The Southern Vanquishing Marshal's face turned even colder, and he sternly barked, "Ji Tianxing, in just a few short years you actually broke into the true God realm?" Although he couldn't see through Ji Tianxing's cultivation base, he couldn't figure out Ji Tianxing's background. But if Ji Tianxing could so quickly kill General Dian Xing and take a punch from him, he had to be at the true God realm. Ji Tianxing did not answer. Instead, he playfully said, "The Zero Continent is in chaos, and your trusted General Dian Xing has been obliterated by me. Do you like this big gift?" Chapter 2580. The South Conquering Marshal's pupils constricted, and hatred flashed in his eyes. However, he remained calm and did not show any anger or irritation. He knew very well that Ji Tianxing was deliberately provoking him to disturb his state of mind. "So what? You just took advantage of the fact that Ben Shui was in seclusion to use your trick." The South conquering marshal sneered contemptuously. Do you think that you are qualified to fight with Ben Shui just because you have reached the true immortal realm? You are too naive. Ben Shui will soon let you know that you are seeking your own death by crossing the void to Zixiao planet. As he spoke, the South conquering marshal waved his blood-colored halberd and charged toward Ji Tianxing. Swoosh! Swoosh! Two dark red blades of light that were hundreds of meters long slashed toward Ji Tianxing with the power to destroy everything in their path. Humph! You are the one who will die. Ji Tianxing snorted coldly. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and slashed out two dazzling golden sword lights. Bam! Bam! With two muffled sounds, the dark red light blades and dazzling golden sword lights collided and both collapsed at the same time. Violent waves of air exploded, blooming into a dazzling brilliance in the night sky. The next moment, the South conquering marshal rushed to Ji Tianxing and stabbed with his blood-colored halberd. Ji Tianxing held the sword of burial of heaven in front of him and blocked the attack of the halberd. Clang! With a crisp sound of metal exploding, the halberd and the sword of burial of heaven separated upon contact. Ji Tianxing and the South conquering marshal were sent flying at the same time. However, while the South conquering marshal was sent flying back thousands of feet, Ji Tianxing was sent flying 10 miles away. Although neither of them was injured, there was a difference in their strength. Ji Tianxing was obviously weaker. Seeing this, the Southern Expedition Marshal laughed ferociously. He held his halberd and attacked Ji Tianxing again. You just broke through to the true God realm and you dare to seek revenge from Ben Shui? He must be tired of living. After testing out Ji Tianxing's strength, the Southern Expedition Marshal became more confident and confident. His attacks were also more aggressive and ferocious. Ha ha! That was just a warm-up. The real show is about to begin. Ji Tianxing was not afraid at all. He sneered confidently, and a golden light burst out from his body. Shwa! In the next moment, his body expanded several hundred times, turning into a golden giant that was hundreds of feet tall. Dazzling golden light swirled around his body, forming the projection of a massive golden dragon. A vast and mighty divine aura that could suppress the heavens and the earth erupted from his body. Roar! He opened his mouth and roared. Holding the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, he used the heaven-splitting earth-splitting technique and fiercely slashed at the Southern Marshal. Clang! The sword of burial of heaven that was hundreds of feet long struck the blood-colored halberd fiercely, exploding with an earth-shattering sound. The incomparably violent power immediately shook the halberd, and the Southern Expedition Marshal was also sent flying. He rolled across the sky and flew for a full 20 miles before stopping. After standing still in the night sky, he looked at Ji Tianxing in horror and roared in disbelief. This is impossible! You actually mastered the Dragon Clan's secret technique that can increase your combat strength by 6 times? The Southern Expedition Marshal was very knowledgeable. In the process of conquering the stars, he had interacted with the Dragon Clan before. Because of this, he was even more surprised and shocked. Because he knew that the Dragon Clan was arrogant and claimed to be the most perfect clan in the world. They did not take the other clans seriously. As for the Dragon Clan's secret technique, the Dragon Clan would never teach it to outsiders. Other clans could not learn it either. At this moment, the Southern Expedition Marshal even suspected that Ji Tianxing was from the Dragon Clan. However, before he could open his mouth to question him, Ji Tianxing charged over again. Sword of Burial of Heaven. He held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and unleashed the most powerful divine power, slashing out a pitch-black sword light. Although the sword light was pitch-black, it was different from the night sky. It was a kind of solid black that contained a terrifying chill of death. The Southern Expedition Marshal's divine soul was locked by the sword light, and he was instantly filled with horror. His whole body turned cold as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He had no time to think. Why was the power of this sword so terrifying that it could make him feel the arrival of death? At this critical moment, he could only hold the blood-colored halberd with both hands and raise it above his head to block in front of him. Bang! In the next moment, the sword of death that was thousands of feet long slashed the blood-colored halberd. The pitch-black sword light collapsed on the spot and exploded into thousands of pieces, splashing in all directions. The blood-colored halberd had a dent in it, and it trembled violently. The halberd made a dull buzzing sound, as if it could not bear the burden, and was about to break. The Southern Expedition Marshal was sent flying again. His face turned purple, and the blood in his body surged. Boom! He fell from the night sky and smashed into the spacious square. A deep pit with a radius of tens of thousands of feet appeared on the ground. Gravel and soil splashed out, blocking the night sky. The square was instantly turned into ruins. The entire sacred palace kept shaking. The ground cracked, and the palaces kept collapsing. The violent shock wave sent the martial gods of the foreign tribes, who were watching the battle, flying dozens of miles away. They fell into the vast sea of clouds. Many unlucky martial gods of the foreign tribes had blood spurting out of their orifices. They were seriously injured. Such an outcome made everyone turn pale with fright. They were terrified. They had not seen the power of a true god until then. It was terrifying. As martial gods, they were not qualified to interfere in a battle between true gods. Even watching the battle was very dangerous. They might even lose their lives. More than 100 martial gods of the foreign tribes flew away and retreated 200 miles away. The battle in the night sky was still going on. Ji Tianxing and the Southern Expedition Marshal were fighting fiercely. One of them was covered in golden light as if he were a god. The other kept expanding and became a pitch-black beast the size of a mountain. It waved its halberd wildly and roared. The two figures flashed in the night sky. They could change directions 3 times in an instant and move dozens of miles away. Many martial gods of the foreign tribes could not see their real bodies. They could only see their shadows. At the same time, the captains and black-armored guards of the heaven-conquering divine palace came from all directions and surrounded the battlefield. More than 100 captains, along with more than 1,000 guards, surrounded the area so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Seeing Ji Tianxing and the South-conquering marshal fighting, the crowd was united against a common enemy, cursing and roaring in anger. They spread out and formed a mysterious and huge battle formation. They worked together to cast divine arts and secret arts to attack Ji Tianxing. However, Ji Tianxing was too fast, and he had mastered the laws of space. His body flashed and appeared and disappeared. Even the martial gods could not lock on to him. As a result, the attacks of more than 1,000 guards could not touch him at all. The divine arts cast by more than 100 captains covered a radius of 200 miles. However, they could not hit Ji Tianxing accurately. The overwhelming dark red light turned the entire divine palace into a sea of blood. However, the captains and guards could not help the Southern Expedition Marshal. Instead, they made the battlefield even more chaotic. Chapter 2581. Soon, 100 seconds had passed. Ji Tianxing and Marshal Nan had exchanged more than 3,000 blows, but there was still no winner. Both of them were slightly injured. There were a few more wounds on their bodies, and blood kept gushing out. The destructive shockwave swept through the entire divine palace and destroyed dozens of palaces. Only a few palaces were protected by the divine array and temporarily survived, but they were also on the verge of collapse. Many of the captains and guards were worried and anxious. They really wanted to help Marshal Nan kill Ji Tianxing quickly. However, they were too weak to be of any use. Instead, they kept causing trouble, making Marshal Nan feel helpless. Marshal Nan wanted to seize the opportunity to wave his blood-colored halberd twice in a row and give Ji Tianxing a fatal blow. However, at the critical moment, many captains and guards joined forces to release attacks that poured down like a torrential flood. Ji Tianxing used the law of space and teleported away. Marshal Nan was also forced to retreat. This finally angered the southern conquering marshal. He roared, "A bunch of useless trash! Don't cause trouble for Ben Shuai. Set up the array immediately." Hearing the order, the captains showed fear in their eyes and hurriedly stopped attacking. They each led a dozen black armored guards and scattered around the battlefield, starting to set up the array. Although they were weak and could not interfere in a battle between true gods, they could set up a sealing array to seal the area. Then, they could release the unique power of the Heaven Punishers to suppress Ji Tianxing and weaken his strength. However, the South conquering marshal would not be affected by this. Thinking of this, many captains were excited and looked forward to it. However, while the idea was plentiful, the reality was bony. Whoosh! Ji Tianxing's figure flashed and instantly crossed the night sky, escaping the encirclement. He flew to the back of the Divine Palace and appeared above the Golden Sun Palace. The captains were stunned for a moment and looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Join forces to attack? They might not be able to hit Ji Tianxing. Instead, they would be in the way and affect Marshal Nan's performance. Stand by and do nothing? Isn't this too stupid? Too stupid. It was disloyal of him to watch the Southern Expedition Marshal fight alone and not help him. For a moment, the captains had no idea what to do. They could only chase after him and rush to Jinyang Palace. The Southern Expedition Marshal's face was as dark as the bottom of a pot. His eyes flashed with a cold light, and his lungs were about to explode from anger. His strength was stronger than Ji Tianxing, and he had so many subordinates, but he couldn't stop Ji Tianxing. This was a great humiliation. Moreover, there were more than 100 martial gods of the foreign tribes watching from the Sea of Clouds not far away. The South conquering marshal was utterly humiliated. "Little bastard, Ben Shuai will tear you apart." The furious Southern Expedition marshal recklessly rushed towards Ji Tianxing, holding his halberd with both hands and chopping down. Shua! A 3,000 zhang long glowing blade slashed down fiercely like a giant axe. This light blade was purplish-red in color, which was a sign that the power had been condensed to the limit. However, the Southern Expedition marshal regretted it as soon as the dark red light blade slashed out. He suddenly remembered that there was an ancient divine bird suppressed in the dilapidated Jinyang Palace. That was the Golden Roc, which was as powerful as him and had a noble bloodline. If the dark red light blade slashed down, it would definitely destroy the Jinyang Palace and even kill the Golden Roc. Thinking of this, the Southern Expedition marshal was filled with regret and anger. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Boom! In the deafening noise, the dark red light blade fell from the sky and instantly shattered the Jinyang Palace. The huge palace turned into ruins on the spot, and billions of pieces of gravel burst out. Ji Tianxing teleported 100 li away and easily dodged it. The Southern Expedition marshal roared and quickly chased after him with his halberd. Of course, when he passed by the ruins of the Jinyang Palace, he subconsciously glanced at it. Under the ruins, the abyss and the sealing array were still there, but they were a little broken. Seeing this, the Southern Expedition marshal was relieved. He quickly ordered the captains, "What are you waiting for? Go and suppress the divine bird. Don't let it escape." More than 100 captains suddenly felt as if they had been pardoned. They finally had something to do. They no longer had to pretend to attack. They all rushed to the ruins of the Jinyang Palace. But at this moment, the sealing array that shrouded the abyss suddenly shattered. Chirp! A clear and high-pitched chirp of a bird came from the abyss. The piercing sound clearly contained surprise and excitement, as well as monstrous killing intent. Many captains were dumbfounded. The Southern Expedition marshal was also shocked. He quickly turned around and looked at the ruins of the Jinyang Palace. He saw a dazzling golden light shoot up from the abyss like a thunderbolt. Swoosh! In the next moment, the mountain-like golden figure instantly crossed the night sky and rushed in front of the Southern Expedition marshal. While the Southern Expedition Marshal was shocked, he subconsciously placed his halberd in front of him. Bang! The golden figure crashed into the Southern Expedition Marshal, creating a deafening sound. The terrifying impact sent Marshal Nanjinan flying. 2 streams of blood spurted out from his nose and mouth. The blood-colored halberd in his hand was also sent flying. He also let out a painful scream. After flying for 30 miles and standing firmly in the night sky, he found that there was a bloody hole in his chest. His organs and bones could be seen clearly in the bloody hole. Dark red blood also gushed out like a flood. There was no doubt that this was a wound caused by the Golden Rock. The Southern Expedition Marshal was in unbearable pain. His body trembled. He looked up and saw the Golden Rock spreading its wings and floating in the night sky 40 miles away. At this moment, it was not as weak and dispirited as before. It was full of energy. Its feathers were neat and bright, and it even emitted a dazzling metallic luster. Its injuries had recovered by more than half. However, there was a crack on its sharp beak. Blood kept gushing out. The attack just now was a fatal attack that it had prepared for a long time. Unfortunately, this attack did not kill the Southern Expedition Marshal. It only severely injured him. The Southern Expedition Marshal's figure flashed and grabbed the blood-colored halberd that fell from the sky. He held it firmly in his hand and blocked in front of him. He looked at the Golden Rock in shock and asked in disbelief, "You feathered beast, you were suppressed by Ben Shui. How can you recover from your injuries?" "Ha ha ha ha!" The Golden Rock sneered and said in a mocking tone, "Of course, I have to thank your lackeys for supporting me when you were not here." "What?" The Southern Expedition Marshal frowned fiercely. His body exploded with anger as he turned to look at the captains in the night sky. Those captains were suppressed by his anger. They were all frightened and shrunk their necks, unable to speak. Only a few captains resisted the pressure of the Southern Expedition Marshal and shouted in fear, "Grand Marshal, don't listen to that B*TCH bird's provocation. Grand Marshal, we are loyal to you. How can we heal its injuries?" Chapter 2582. The Southern Conquering Marshal was only angry for a moment and was blinded by anger. After calming down, he understood that the Golden Rock was trying to sow discord. After all, he knew what the captains were capable of. They would not dare to do such a thing. The South Conquering Marshal looked at the Golden Rock, then turned to look at Ji Tianxing, who was not far away. A thought suddenly flashed through his mind. His face turned cold as he shouted at Ji Tianxing, "Ji Tianxing, was it you?" Ji Tianxing sneered and asked, "So what if it was me?" "So what if it wasn't me? Anyway, you are already at the end of your life. Accept your fate." He and the Golden Rock were both true gods. If they joined forces to attack the South Conquering Marshal, they would definitely win. Moreover, he could fight the South Conquering Marshal to a draw alone. The Golden Rock had just appeared and severely injured the South Conquering Marshal. The outcome of the battle had already been decided. How could the South Conquering Marshal admit defeat? He sneered and said, "Arrogant! Even if you join forces, what can you do? Don't forget that this is Zixiao planet, Ben Shui's territory. Ben Shui has many warriors and more than 100 officials under his command." As he spoke, the South Conquering Marshal looked at the martial gods in the sea of clouds and ordered sternly, "What are you waiting for? Why don't you join forces to fight the enemy and make a name for yourself? If anyone can kill Ji Tianxing, Ben Shui will make him deputy marshal. If anyone can suppress the Golden Rock, Ben Shui will make him a general and give him a true god weapon." The martial gods hiding in the sea of clouds had shrunk their necks and watched the battle carefully. However, no one had expected that the battle would be directed at them. The South Conquering Marshal had ordered them to attack Ji Tianxing and the Golden Rock. What was going on? They were only here to participate in the Myriad Countries Gods Conference to offer tributes and show their loyalty. They were not the South Conquering Marshal's slaves or subordinate. Why should they listen to his orders? Moreover, everyone had seen the terrifying strength of Ji Tianqing and the Golden Rock, so they were unwilling to get close to them. The martial gods of the alien races instinctively resisted the order of the southern conquering marshal. They even stepped back subconsciously. However, the southern expedition marshal's promise was extremely tempting. Whoever killed Ji Tianqing would be promoted to the position of deputy marshal. The one who suppressed the Golden Rock would be given the title of Great General and a true god weapon. This was simply too breathtaking. Many martial gods of the alien tribes were overwhelmed with emotions. Their eyes were burning with greed. However, no one was in a hurry to jump out. Everyone looked left and right, observing the reactions of others. Gradually, some people's wills were shaken, and they began to walk forward. Yes, Grand Marshal. With someone taking the lead, more people immediately followed suit. One outsider martial god after another walked out of the sea of clouds with Kenshin weapons in their hands. I am willing to serve the Grand Marshal. The Southern Expedition Marshal is invincible. He will definitely unify the entire star field. No one will be able to stop him. We are willing to charge into the enemy lines for the Grand Marshal. In just a few seconds, 40-some martial gods of the alien tribes had flown toward the battlefield, their faces brimming with anticipation. The remaining martial gods remained in the sea of clouds, not daring to act rashly. The majority of them were watching, their minds still hesitating and struggling. Only a small number of people hated the heaven-punishing race to the bone and refused to submit even when the temptation was right in front of them. For example, God Lord Silvermoon. She had been watching the battle this entire time, her blood boiling with excitement, her eyes fixed on Ji Tianqing the entire time. When she saw Ji Tianqing display his invincible might and fight to a draw with the Southern Expedition Marshal, she was so excited that she almost screamed. She finally believed in Ji Tianqing completely. She also saw a ray of hope and silently prayed that Ji Tianqing would be able to kill the Southern Expedition Marshal. But now, the Southern Expedition Marshal had made all the martial gods of the alien tribes bow their heads. These spineless martial gods of the alien tribes wanted to point their butcher's knives at Ji Tianqing. This had crossed God Lord Silvermoon's bottom line, and she was furious. Whoosh! Her body flashed as she flew into the air. The expressions of the two old women who had been standing behind her suddenly changed, revealing a look of deep shock. Doesn't the God Lord hate the heaven-punishing race to the bone? Why would she listen to the Southern Expedition Marshal's orders? Has the God Lord's personality changed? Or was the Southern Expedition Marshal's offer too tempting? The two old women glanced at each other and secretly communicated with their divine senses. But a moment later, the two of them understood God Lord Silvermoon's intentions. God Lord Silvermoon flew into the air and blocked the path of the foreign martial gods. Filled with righteous indignation, he cursed, "You shameless, spineless idiots, stop right there." In order to make it easier to communicate, she and the rest of the crowd were speaking the rather clumsy language of the heaven-punishing. But everyone understood, and they immediately stopped and angrily glared at her. The more than 100 martial gods in the Sea of Clouds, the Southern Expedition Marshal, Ji Tianqing, and the Golden Rock all turned to her. Everyone's eyes were focused on God Lord Silvermoon, and they were filled with shock, confusion, and anger. God Lord Silvermoon was fearless as she angrily shouted, "All of you are God Lords from various great worlds, leaders of various races. Just like me, your worlds and people were invaded and massacred by the heaven-punishing race. We were all defeated. At least several billion of our people were slaughtered, and countless people were left homeless or even enslaved by the heaven-punishing race. To this day, we have brought a large number of tributes to Purple Heaven Star, but our people are still living in the abyss of suffering and darkness." God Lord Silvermoon's voice was impassioned, and her clear eyes glistened with tears. The several dozen martial gods had originally been angrily glaring at her. But now, their anger had dissipated, and they quietly lowered their heads. God Lord Silvermoon pointed at Ji Tianxing and loudly said, "We were very fortunate. After enduring the deliberate humiliation of the heaven-punishing race, we encountered a great hero. It was him who killed several hundred martial gods of the heaven-punishing race and several thousand guards of the heaven-punishing race. He threw the Zero Continent into chaos, and the people of the various races saw hope and banded together to resist the rule of the heaven-punishing race. Now, the flames of war are burning all over the continent, and the people of the various races are using their blood and lives in exchange for their freedom. It was also Ji Tianxing who killed General Dianxing and wanted to kill Marshal Jinan. He wanted to get rid of the source of all evil, unravel the scheme of the heaven-punishing race, and save all the people of the Purple Heaven Star Zone. Because just like us, he was invaded and persecuted by the heaven-punishing race. At this point, God Lord Silvermoon drew back her hand and looked disdainfully at the martial gods of the various races. She derisively scolded, "In front of the heaven-punishing race, we are all tragic victims. We should unite and work together to overthrow the rule of the heaven-punishing race and take back our freedom. But what about you? What are you doing? For the sake of Marshal Jinan's empty promise, you are ungrateful and want to attack our compatriots and kill our hero? Where is your conscience? Think about the billions of souls that died at the hands of the heaven-punishing race. Are you worthy of them?" Chapter 2583. God Lord Silvermoon's impassioned words had ignited the blood of all the foreign martial gods. Especially the last few sentences that were filled with righteousness and sternness, they struck directly at the heart and enlightened the apathetic. The 40-some foreign martial gods were all ashamed, their faces dejected as they lowered their heads, not daring to meet God Lord Silvermoon's eyes. The martial gods of the foreign tribes who were still hesitating in the sea of clouds burst into an uproar. Many of them nodded in agreement and echoed God Lord Silvermoon's words. There were even some people who flew out of the sea of clouds into the night sky and raised their arms to shout. "Everyone, I'm sure that all of you have seen that Marshal Jinan is doomed. He is no match for Ji Tianxing and the Golden Rock. The heaven-punishing race that swept through half the star zone is not invincible." An old man with white hair and a beard flew to God Lord Silvermoon's side and roared, "Tonight is the best chance for us to rise up and take back our freedom. Even if I die in battle and spill my blood over Purple Heaven Planet, this old man will not compromise." As he spoke, God Lord Silvermoon called out once more, "Everyone, although we come from different great worlds and have never met each other before, we all share the same dignity. But I believe that we all share the same dignity and pride. We are all mighty martial gods who rule over our worlds and educate millions of people, who would be willing to submit to others and become the slaves and dogs of the heaven-punishing race." These words resonated with the foreign martial gods, and countless of them nodded in agreement. When God Lord Silvermoon saw that the conscience and courage of these people had been awakened, he struck while the iron was hot. "Before this, we were scattered across the various great worlds, isolated and without help. We were defeated one by the heaven-punishing race, but we were powerless to fight back. But now we are gathered together. A supreme expert like Ji Tianxing has appeared among us. By killing Marshal Jinan without hesitation, he has already begun this war. What are you still afraid of? What are you waiting for? If you don't join him in killing Marshal Jinan, will you ever have another chance? Unless you want to be slaves for the rest of your lives, to be humiliated and trampled upon by the heaven-punishing race." Toward the end, God Lord Silvermoon's voice grew several times louder, his tone impassioned. His voice echoed in the night sky, echoing in the ears of the non-humankind martial gods. Countless people puffed out their chests and raised their heads, revealing resolute gazes. Many martial gods even took out their divine artifacts, their bodies bursting with soaring battle intent. One roar after another came from the crowd and the sea of clouds. "The Bear Clan will never be slaves. Fighting for freedom, The Battle Wolf clan will never surrender. For the sake of peace, the elves are willing to shed their blood. The sun and moon can bear witness. I would rather die standing than live kneeling. The heavenly lion tribe will never back down. One hot-blooded foreign martial god after another stood at God Lord Silvermoon's side. Within a short span of 10 breaths, more than 30 foreign race martial gods had gathered around her. As a result, the more than 40 alien martial gods who wanted to besiege Ji Tianxing completely gave up on the idea. Many martial gods walked out of the crowd and stood with God Lord Silvermoon. In the sea of clouds, those hesitant martial gods also made up their minds to unwaveringly support God Lord Silvermoon. Upon seeing this, God Lord Silvermoon gave a gratified smile. She turned to Ji Tianxing, a faint smile in her eyes. Her eyes seemed to be saying, "Hey! You told me to get ready and I've done it. I didn't disappoint you, did I?" Ji Tianxing understood the look in her eyes and gave her a slight nod, a faint smile in his eyes. God Lord Silvermoon's body instantly went stiff, her heart stopping. Her eyes widened in disbelief, only one thought running through her mind. This scoundrel. He actually knows how to smile. Ever since she had interacted with Ji Tianxing, she had only found him to be mysterious, callous, stern, and arrogant. Only now did she realize that even icebergs could melt. This mysterious and aloof fellow also had a warm heart. For a moment, God Lord Silvermoon was somewhat dazed, and she looked at Ji Tianxing with eyes brimming with favor. But the southern vanquishing marshal could no longer sit still. His face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and he angrily cursed, "Bastard! You bunch of bastards who don't know what's good for you! You lowly insects of a foreign race! If not for Ben Shuai's benevolence and sparing your lives, how could you have survived until now? You actually listened to that slut's instigation and dared to make an enemy of my race? Have you considered the consequences?" The south-conquering marshal glanced at all the gods of war with a fierce look, then growled with a voice as loud as a great bell, "Don't think that you can defeat me with just one Ji Tianxing and a severely wounded feathered beast. My race is invincible. Ben Shuai will quickly tear the two of them to pieces and grind their bones to dust. Now Ben Shuai will give all of you one last chance. Those who swear fealty to Ben Shuai will be freed from slavery and will be richly rewarded. Those who oppose Ben Shuai will all be executed, and all their subjects will be slaughtered." The rolling sound waves were like muffled thunder, flowing through the night sky, deafening everyone. The 100-some foreign race martial gods instantly grimaced, their expressions varying. Some were filled with fear, their wills beginning to waver. Some were even angrier, and their desire to resist the heaven-punishing race intensified. 10-some foreign race martial gods changed their minds and prepared to fly toward the southern vanquishing marshal. At this moment, Ji Tianxing sinisterly roared, "The heaven-punishing race deserves to die, and those who help the wicked are even more detestable. I will kill anyone who swears fealty to the heaven-punishing race. If you're not afraid of death, then go." As he spoke, he gripped the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and pointed it at the restless foreign race martial gods, his entire body erupting with killing intent. The dozen or so martial gods of the alien tribes were intimidated by him. They retreated in fear. The southern vanquishing marshal was furious at this sight. "Ji Tianxing, you despicable B*****, Ben Shuai will kill you first." The southern vanquishing marshal could no longer suppress his anger. With a roar, he charged toward Ji Tianxing, thrusting his blood-red halberd forward. The halberd gave off a red light that shot into the sky, turning into a sharp red light that tore through the darkness and space. "Ha ha ha! A loser like you dares to act tough?" Ji Tianxing laughed heartily as he swung the sword of burial of heaven toward the southern vanquishing marshal. Bam! The dark golden sword light that was thousands of feet long clashed with the blood-red light, creating a loud explosion that shook the 9 heavens. The berserk shockwave, wrapped in endless fragments of light, burst out in all directions, engulfing the entire area. More than 100 foreign race martial gods, more than 100 captains of the heaven-punishing fleet, and more than 1,000 black armored guards within 300 miles were all affected. No one was able to stay out of the battle. Bastard heaven-punishing dog, die! The golden rock roared furiously and turned into a golden light that charged toward the southern vanquishing marshal. It worked together with Ji Tianxing to pincer the southern vanquishing marshal. After exchanging a few blows, the two flew into the sky. Kill all the heaven-punishing dogs and take back our freedom! God Lord Silvermoon roared as she unsheathed her sword and charged at the captains of the heaven-punishing fleet. The 100 foreign race martial gods were not to be outdone, and they all charged with her. An earth-shattering battle broke out. Chapter 2584. Boom, boom, boom. Ji Tianxing, the Golden Rock, and the Southern Conquering Marshal were fighting fiercely in the sky. Deafening explosions continued to ring out, shaking the clouds. Beams of crimson light, golden light, and blazing flames mixed with all kinds of divine art. They kept blooming in the night sky. The area within 1,000 miles was dazzling, and the five-colored divine light was extremely dazzling. The three true gods unleashed their full power and used their trump cards to kill the other party as soon as possible. There were dragon claws and giant palms that covered the sky. They smashed the sky with the power to destroy everything. There were saber lights and sword shadows that were hundreds of thousands of feet long. They destroyed the sky with one strike, causing space to collapse and spatial storms to form. There were also all kinds of divine light illusions that formed thousands of images that clashed with each other. As time passed, the battle between the three true gods became more and more intense. The battlefield also shifted to the distance. Within a radius of several thousand miles, the night sky was shattered and filled with void storms. The terrifying shockwaves of the battle destroyed the heaven-punishing divine palace. The once magnificent palaces and pavilions turned to dust and scattered across the sky. Many heaven-punishing guards were also swept away by the shockwaves of the battle and turned to dust. Even many of the martial gods and heaven-punishing captains were unlucky and killed by the shockwaves of the battle. Fortunately, the three true gods had gone far away, and the martial gods were no longer worried. However, the battle between the true gods became even more intense. The heaven-punishing divine palace had the advantage in numbers. Not only did they have more than 100 captains, but they also had more than 1,000 black-armored guards. They were well-trained and experienced in battle. They cooperated well and could use all kinds of joint attacks and secret techniques smoothly. As for the more than 100 alien race martial gods, they came from different worlds. Not only were they unfamiliar with each other and did not cooperate, but even their divine power attributes were chaotic. Naturally, the combat power of the martial gods was greatly reduced. After fighting for 15 minutes, the martial gods of the other races were at a disadvantage and started to get tired of defending. Even their numbers had decreased by 40%. Only 90 martial gods were left. On the other hand, only 400 heaven-punishing guards and more than 20 captains had been killed. Moreover, as time passed, this gap continued to widen. An hour later, only 500 heaven-punishing guards and more than 100 captains remained. However, 70% of the alien martial gods had been killed. Only 40 or so martial gods were still holding on bitterly, fighting a bloody battle. They were all heavily injured, each in a more miserable state than the other, and their combat strength had weakened greatly. Left with no choice, the martial gods could only retreat towards the distant sea of clouds. His previous hot-bloodedness and surging fighting spirit had now cooled down. Many martial gods began to feel pessimistic and hopeless. Some even felt regret. However, what was done could not be undone. Now that the situation had developed to this point, there was no turning back. Only God Lord Silvermoon remained unperturbed. Even though the two old women had been killed by the captains of the heaven-slaying fleet in order to protect her. Even though she was also heavily injured, her hair was disheveled, and she was covered in blood. However, she had been holding on stubbornly, covering the rear for the many martial gods. She covered everyone's retreat while resisting the pursuit of the captain of the heaven-slaying fleet. Her injuries were worsening. Soon, another 15 minutes had passed. The two parties chased each other for thousands of miles. Everywhere they passed, the sea of clouds dissipated. Countless corpses and pieces of flesh were scattered in the night sky, and the air was filled with the thick stench of blood. There were only about 20 alien martial gods left. Meanwhile, the number of heaven-slaying fleet captains had only decreased by 10. The gap in numbers and strength between the two sides had widened even further. The outcome was decided. No matter how desperately the alien martial gods fought, only death awaited them. Many people wanted to flee, but they realized that they couldn't. 80-some captains of the heaven-slaying fleet led 400-some black-armored guards in a massive encirclement that trapped the alien martial gods. The battle came to an abrupt end. 20-some alien martial gods gathered together, their hearts filled with despair as they awaited death. The captains and guards in the night sky slowly approached, seething with killing intent. "It's over. We're all dead now. Ha ha ha, this is the price of being impulsive. A moment of hot-bloodedness, but you'll soon die a miserable death in a foreign land. What a fool. A bad life is better than a good death. Compared to life, what are freedom and dignity?" In this despairing atmosphere, many martial gods smiled bitterly, feeling sorry for themselves. God Lord Silvermoon had a nasty expression, her emotions extremely complicated. Their words were very grating, but she had no way of refuting them, because the truth was before her eyes. This was not her first time witnessing the power of the heaven-slaying race. She was only somewhat disappointed as she thought to herself, "I didn't think that these alien martial gods would be so uncooperative and have such a low fighting power. If we could have held on for a few more hours, we might have had a chance. Alas, we're all going to die soon." Right at that moment, a general wearing golden armor walked out from among the captains of the Heaven Punisher clan. General Lei Hong gripped his broad sword as he sneered at the alien martial gods. In a mocking tone, he said, "Insects of the alien races, are you finally regretting it? You've already seen the invincible strength of my race, so why seek your own deaths? My race is benevolent. Even though you've betrayed my race, this general will still give you a chance to live." Hearing this, the 20 or so martial gods of the alien tribes who had been in despair suddenly became spirited. Their eyes were filled with hope. Only God Lord Silvermoon realized that the situation was bad, and her eyes flashed with cold light. As expected, General Lei Hong sneered and said, "This god knows that you don't want to die. You were very willing to serve my race. It's just that you were muddle-headed for some bastard's instigation and betrayal. Now hand over that bastard, and this god will spare your lives. This god will execute that bastard in front of everyone and give him the death penalty." As General Lei Hong spoke, the 20-some foreign martial gods all turned to God Lord Silvermoon. Even the martial gods of other races standing beside her had retreated far away. God Lord Silvermoon was instantly isolated, standing alone in the night sky. General Lei Hong savagely stared at her, his eyes brimming with bloodthirsty killing intent. "Ha ha ha, that's right, it was you." The alien martial gods all began to beg for mercy or rebuke God Lord Silvermoon. "General, we were all instigated. Please forgive us for our impulsiveness." "Lord General, as long as you spare our lives, we'll pledge our loyalty to you and never betray you. That slut, you're the one who killed everyone. Kneel and accept your death." "Right. If she hadn't instigated everyone, how could we have done such a foolish thing?" The alien martial gods were all agitated. As they tried to curry favor with General Lei Hong, they tried to drive God Lord Silvermoon away so that they could draw a clear line between them and her. God Lord Silvermoon was not angry. She calmly scanned the area, and when she saw the alien martial gods, she instantly understood. Those hot-blooded martial gods who had staunchly supported her and Ji Tianqing had all died in battle long ago. The surviving martial gods were basically those who were indecisive and shameless, who even wanted to besiege Ji Tianqing. Chapter 2585. In the Sky. The battle between Ji Tianqing, the Golden Rock, and the South-conquering marshal had reached its most intense moment. They had exchanged tens of thousands of blows, and the battlefield had spanned 20,000 miles. The mountains and rivers had shattered, and the night sky had collapsed. Of course, both of them had suffered serious injuries. Ji Tianqing's body was covered with wounds. His golden body, which was hundreds of meters tall, was covered with crisscrossing wounds, from which golden blood kept flowing out. However, he turned a blind eye to his injuries and continued to fight while bathed in blood. His long hair fluttered in the wind. He held the 300-meter-long heaven-burying sword and attacked wildly with an imposing aura. The sword radiance swept across 3,000 miles, and the surging divine power shook the clouds. The Golden Rock was also covered in blood. Numerous wounds covered his entire body. Even its wide wings were filled with cracks and holes, from which golden divine blood continuously flowed out. However, it didn't seem to feel any pain. It completely ignored its injuries and attacked crazily. It didn't care even if it hurt 800 of its enemies and 1,000 of its own. It couldn't help it. Its hatred for the South-conquering marshal was too deep. Couldn't be washed clean even with all the water in the world. In comparison, the South-conquering marshal was in a more tragic situation. Even if he used a secret technique to transform into a giant black beast and showed his terrifying side, he couldn't escape from being seriously injured. There wasn't a piece of intact flesh on his body, and most of the black scales on his body had been removed. His wide left palm had been cut off, and there was a hideous wound on his right shoulder. His bones could be seen clearly. Even his huge head had been cut off by the burial of heaven. He had lost his ears and half of his face. Even so, he didn't fear or retreat. He was still brave and unparalleled. In the face of Ji Tianqing and the Golden Rock's pincer attack, he tried his best to resist and was always on the verge of death. Finally, the two sides had exchanged hundreds of blows. Ji Tianqing finally found an opportunity to seize the South-conquering marshal's weakness and decisively used his ultimate secret technique. God slaying. He suddenly raised his left palm and shot out a dazzling golden light toward the South-conquering marshal's chest. Swish! That dazzling golden light was very small, only the length of a finger, but it was extremely dazzling. It flashed in the night sky and disappeared. The South-conquering marshal immediately realized that something was wrong. He sensed that death was coming. His divine soul was cold. At the critical moment, he didn't hesitate to use teleport. He wanted to travel through the alternate space and change his position. However, it was already too late. The speed and power of the god-slaying flying dagger were pushed to the extreme by Ji Tianqing. Boom! With a deafening muffled sound, a golden light pierced into the Southern Expedition marshal's chest. Incomparably hard black scales, thick flesh, and divine bones that had been tempered thousands of times were all unable to block the god-slaying flying dagger's attack. The palm-sized golden flying dagger pierced into his chest 10 meters deep, bringing out a spray of dark red blood that sprinkled into the night sky. However, the impact of the flying dagger was neutralized, and it couldn't penetrate Marshal Jinnan's body. Seeing this, Marshal Jinnan grunted and immediately used his divine power. He wanted to use his flesh and divine bones to clamp the flying dagger firmly. Ji Tianqing controlled the flying dagger decisively. It exploded with destructive power in Marshal Jinnan's chest. Boom! With an earth-shattering explosion, Marshal Jinnan's chest was blown into a crater that had a radius of 10 meters. Countless pieces of flesh and broken bones splattered into the night sky as if there was a rainstorm. The huge impact made Marshal Jinnan's body tremble. He couldn't help but fly backward and fall into the ruins 30 miles away. Plop! His 1,000-meter-tall body was like a mountain. He landed heavily on the ruins, kicking up dust into the air. He curled up in the deep pit, his body buried in dust. He was still trembling as he let out a painful roar. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and the Golden Rock both let out a sigh of relief. Marshal Jinan has been severely injured. His combat ability must have decreased greatly. Tonight will be the day he dies. As long as we kill him, Zixiao planet will be saved. The man and the bird communicated with each other using their divine consciousness. Just then, Marshal Jinan struggled a few times and climbed out of the crater. Swoosh! He shook his body a few times to shake off the dust on his body. Even though there was a huge bloody hole in his chest, after using a special secret technique, he became full of energy again. Although the wound looked ferocious and fatal, it wasn't much of a threat to him. He, Marshal Jinan, stood high in the sky and looked down at Ji Tianqing and the Golden Rock. He sneered in a hoarse voice. "Little bastard! Do you think Ben Shuai is the same as the other martial gods? Do you think Ben Shuai's chest is his Achilles' heel? Ha 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 ha! You're too naive. Ben Shuai is a true god. A true god with an immortal body." Marshal Jinan pointed at the bloody hole in his chest and the wounds all over his body. He sneered. "Can these superficial wounds hurt Ben Shuai? What a joke! Even if Ben Shuai is cut in half and his head is chopped off, he can still kill you two bastards." As he finished speaking, he raised his head and roared at the sky. Dark purple divine fire burned all over his body, releasing a terrifying wave of divine power. Ah! His thunderous roar reverberated in the sky, shaking the earth and shattering the night sky. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's expression became even more serious, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The Golden Rock's eyes turned even colder. After hesitating for a while, he said to Ji Tianqing, "The physical bodies of the Heaven Punishers are unparalleled. They are almost immortal. Marshal Jinan is right. He is a true god expert. Even if we cut him into pieces, he can still survive. If we want to kill him, we have to blast him into pieces." The Golden Rock's tone was very low, containing a hint of decisiveness. Ji Tianqing immediately realized that something was wrong. He hurriedly asked, "Golden Rock, what are you trying to do?" The Golden Rock did not answer. He only said in a low voice, "Tianqing, I'll leave the rest to you. I hope you can save Zixiao planet." As he finished speaking, he raised his head to the sky and let out a long cry. Then, he slowly closed his wings. Then, golden divine fire burned all over his body and rose fiercely. It was as if there was a power in his body that had been dormant for tens of thousands of years. It immediately awakened and surged out like a volcano. The dazzling golden divine fire wrapped around his slender body, making him look like a giant golden flaming sword. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately understood the Golden Rock's intention. He shouted anxiously, "Golden Rock, stop! We still have a chance. Why do you have to do this?" The Golden Rock turned around and glanced at him. He said calmly, "No, this is the only way to kill him. I've said it before. As long as I can kill Marshal Jinan, I will do it at any cost." After saying that, it flew across the night sky without hesitation and charged towards the southern marshal. Chapter 2586. The Golden Rock burned all of its divine power and lifespan to unleash its strongest power. It even ignited the divine beast blood of the Golden Rock clan to unleash its power to the maximum. It was like a giant golden sword that could split heaven and earth. It charged toward the Southern Expedition Marshal with an unstoppable momentum. This moment was the most glorious and dazzling moment of its life. But it was also the last moment of its life. The Southern Expedition Marshal was using a secret technique. He roared with his head held high. His body was burning with purple divine fire and was accumulating mighty divine power. When the golden rock charged toward him in a suicidal manner, he was stunned for a moment. His eyes were filled with disbelief. He couldn't believe that the golden rock would be so decisive to self-destruct. After coming back to his senses, he quickly retreated as fast as he could. However, he was stabbed in the face by the golden rock when he was only 20 miles away. Boom! The golden rock stabbed into the Southern Expedition Marshal's chest like a giant sword. There was a loud explosion that shook the sky. The bloody hole in the Southern Expedition Marshal's chest was torn open on the spot and expanded 20 times. The golden rock drilled into his chest and pierced through his majestic body. Its sharp beak came out from his back. The violent and unparalleled force of impact sent Marshal Nanjinan flying backward. The excruciating pain made him tremble. He looked up and roared in pain. But this wasn't the end. In the next moment, the golden rock's body exploded. It turned into endless golden divine flames that exploded inside the Southern Expedition Marshal's body. The golden rock had self-destructed. Boom! The Southern conquering Marshal's body was instantly blasted into hundreds of pieces, splashing in all directions. The golden divine flames formed by the golden rock's self-destruction were like the sun. They swallowed hundreds of pieces of flesh and covered thousands of miles. The shockwave was so violent that it sent Ji Tianqing flying a few hundred miles away, crashing heavily into the ruins. He got up from the ruins. He was bleeding from his 7 orifices. His vision was blurry and his consciousness was hazy. He couldn't even walk properly. Fortunately, he was a few hundred miles away from the center of the explosion. He was only injured by the shockwave. If he was too close, he would also be seriously injured by the golden rock's self-detonation. He might even faint on the spot. After all, the power of a true god powerhouse's self-detonation was truly apocalyptic. The divine flames that blotted out the sky and covered thousands of miles of heaven and earth lasted for a long time before dissipating. The incomparably blazing golden light was like a scorching sun, illuminating an area of 100,000 miles as if it was daytime. After a long while, the dazzling golden divine flames gradually dissipated. Everything was over. The golden rock completely dissipated between heaven and earth, and the Southern Expedition Marshal also turned into hundreds of pieces of debris, scattering over thousands of miles. Ji Tianqing dragged his heavily injured body and flew back and forth in the sky. He carefully searched for the pieces of the Southern Expedition Marshal's corpse. The life force of the Heaven Punishers was too strong. In order to prevent the Southern Expedition Marshal from rising from the ashes, Ji Tianqing could only find the pieces of his corpse and burn them with the divine flame. Only then could he prevent any future troubles. A quarter of an hour later, Ji Tianqing searched through the entire area and only found about 100 pieces of corpses. The rest of the corpses had been burned to nothingness by the golden rock's self-detonation. The surviving corpses still possessed a tenacious life force. If Ji Tianqing did not deal with them, these corpses would move on their own and gather together to form a broken body. If the Southern Expedition Marshal went into hiding to recover for another 1,000 years, he might be able to return to his peak. Fortunately, Ji Tianqing had destroyed the corpses. With this, the Southern Expedition Marshal was completely obliterated and truly dead. After taking care of this matter, Ji Tianqing immediately turned and flew into the distance. He had not forgotten that God Lord Silvermoon and the 100-some foreign martial gods were still fighting with the heaven-punishing captains. Whoosh! 100 seconds later, Ji Tianqing returned to the original battlefield. The sky was still covered in cracks and the ground was covered in ruins and craters. Only the foreign martial gods and the heaven-punishing captains were nowhere to be seen. With a sweep of his spiritual sense, Ji Tianqing was able to determine the direction of the foreign martial gods through the traces left behind in the world and hurriedly pursued. After chasing for 20,000 li, he saw a massive group of black silhouettes in the sky. Even from 2,000 li, he could see them clearly. Dozens of silver-armored captains and more than 400 black-armored guards formed a circle and surrounded the 20 or so martial gods of the alien tribes. His heart thumped at this sight, and he couldn't help but think, only 20-some of the 100-some foreign martial gods are left? They were defeated so quickly and so miserably? He quickly flew to the center of the battlefield. Only when he was still 100 li away from the martial gods did he realize that something was wrong. The heaven-punishing captains and the black-armored guards were superior in numbers, but they only surrounded the foreign martial gods and did not attack. The 20-some foreign martial gods also seemed to be divided. The 20-some of them had retreated, and they were even standing next to a golden-armored general of the heaven-punishing, trying to curry favor with him. As for the martial god, who had been isolated by everyone else, he stood alone in the night sky, enduring endless pressure. Her body was covered in wounds and stained with blood, her hair in disarray, and she looked like a man made of blood. But she still straightened her body, stubbornly raised her head, and calmly faced the golden-armored general. Her resolve, her arrogance, and her composure were all so dazzling and brilliant. Even though she was surrounded by several hundred people, she still could not block out the divine light that came from her bones. In comparison, those 20-some foreign martial gods of various appearances were so ugly and nauseating in Ji Tianqing's eyes. A seething killing intent and fury surged up from Ji Tianqing's heart and into his head. His face cold, he gripped the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and charged into the encirclement. At this moment, the golden-armored General Lei Hong was sneering as he raised his saber and prepared to execute God Lord Silvermoon. Whoosh! His saber exploded with dark red light as it slashed at God Lord Silvermoon's head with an unstoppable might. She knew that her death was certain, but she did not just sit there and wait for it. Erupting with all the divine power in her body, she swung her sword to meet the attack. She gripped her divine sword with both hands and was about to clash with General Lei Hong's saber. At this critical moment, a dazzling golden sword light suddenly cut through the night sky and struck the long saber with a loud bang. Boom! The long saber was immediately sent flying, rolling and smashing 10 miles away. The incomparably violent impact shook General Lei Hong to the point he staggered, and his entire right arm became numb and stiff. Plush! Before General Lei Hong could react, God Lord Silvermoon's divine sword had stabbed into his shoulder and lodged itself in his golden armor. This sudden turn of events left everyone dumbfounded. Several dozen ship captains, 20-some foreign martial gods, General Lei Hong, and God Lord Silvermoon all turned to the side. A human youth dressed in a white robe, his hair disheveled and his body covered in blood, holding a mysterious black sword, appeared next to God Lord Silvermoon. Chapter 2587. The white-robed youth's clothes were disheveled, his body covered in blood, and he looked rather wretched. But his body was as straight as a sword, his eyes as bright as the stars, and his body exuded an unyielding and domineering aura that looked down on all living things. An invisible and powerful pressure began to spread through the world. He was 8 feet tall, but he was like a massive mountain that towered over the world, and one could only look up at him. Everyone present, whether they were martial gods of foreign races or the captains of the heaven-punishing warships, felt deep respect and dread. Everyone understood that this white-robed youth was no martial god. He had surpassed the martial god realm and reached the true god realm. Even if he was covered in wounds, even if he only had a sliver of divine power left, he could still easily kill anyone present. For a moment the air seemed to freeze. Everyone was silent, warily gripping their weapons as they silently retreated. Only God Lord Silvermoon stared at Ji Tianqing with blazing eyes, his dim and gloomy eyes suddenly shining with a bright light and a layer of mist. She had originally believed that she was powerless to reverse the situation and that her death was certain. She only felt regret. Even though she and so many other foreign race martial gods had died in battle, they had not been able to hold down the heaven-punishing warship. But now, she had no regrets. Ji Tianqing had returned alive, which meant that the southern vanquishing marshal had been killed. At the very least, he had been defeated and had fled. In this case, the sacrifice of the 100-some foreign race martial gods had been worth it. With Ji Tianqing standing in front of her, she felt extremely safe and warm. Even though she was surrounded by several hundred heaven-punishing experts, she felt no fear. Her absolute trust in Ji Tianqing had reached the point of blindness. She had no doubt that even in the face of tens of thousands of heaven-punishing experts, Ji Tianqing would be able to slaughter his way out. General Lei Hong and the heaven-punishing warships quickly came to their senses. Everyone knew that Ji Tianqing and the Golden Rock had worked together to besiege the southern vanquishing marshal and had been fighting for a very long time. Now that Ji Tianqing had returned, the southern vanquishing marshal had not appeared. General Lei Hong and the heaven-punishing warships all had an ominous feeling. "Kid, you're still alive?" General Lei Hong looked at Ji Tianqing in shock. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Ji Tianqing looked askance at him, the corners of his mouth hooked up into a sneer. "Otherwise, who do you think could have survived?" The bodies of General Lei Hong and the other captains trembled, and their expressions became even more unsightly. Ji Tianqing's words confirmed their suspicions. However, no one could accept this reality, let alone believe Ji Tianqing's words. General Lei Hong hesitated for a moment, then shouted with a stern tone, "Ji Tianqing, stop keeping me in suspense. Tell me, were you seriously injured by our marshal and fled here?" In the eyes of him and the other captains, the Southern Expedition Marshal was invincible and invincible. No matter what, it was impossible for the Southern Expedition Marshal to lose to Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing's sneer deepened and he said contemptuously, "Stop deceiving yourselves. Your Southern Expedition Marshal has already been crushed into pieces and completely fallen, and you are just a bunch of stray dogs. Don't make any more pointless struggles. Just surrender obediently." His words completely shattered the fantasy of General Lei Hong and the other captains, and also killed the last trace of hope in their hearts. There was an uproar among the captains. All of them revealed shocked, fearful, and worried expressions as they exclaimed and discussed. Even the more than 400 black-armored warriors began to whisper to each other. Everyone was inexplicably shocked and could not believe it. General Lei Hong looked as if he was struck by lightning. His face was pale as he stood rooted to the ground. He muttered to himself, "Impossible! I don't believe that the Grand Marshal will never lose. Ji Tianqing, don't talk nonsense." As he said that, he snatched the saber of a captain beside him and shouted loudly, "Everyone, don't listen to his nonsense. The Grand Marshal is immortal. How can he fall? Everyone, attack together and kill Ji Tianqing. Then, we will help the Grand Marshal to kill the strong enemy." Although many captains and black-armored warriors had guessed that the Southern Expedition Marshal was most likely dead, they were still delusional. They were unwilling to accept this fact and were willing to believe in General Lei Hong. Immediately, many captains and black-armored warriors raised their weapons and shouted at the top of their lungs, "Kill! Kill Ji Tianqing and make a contribution. Whoever can kill him will be rewarded with the position of Deputy Marshal. Everyone, charge!" In the dark night sky, the deafening battle cries reverberated. The next moment, General Lei Hong took the lead and waved his saber to kill Ji Tianqing. The 80-some silver-armored captains also waved their sabers and Kenshin weapons as they roared and charged. Countless sabers and swords flashed in the night sky as they slashed at Ji Tianqing and God Lord Silvermoon from every direction. The two of them were immediately engulfed in red light. 20-some foreign martial gods were afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire and hurriedly retreated. As the sabers and swords came at him, Ji Tianqing grabbed the heavily injured God Lord Silvermoon with his left hand and vanished. Whoosh! A moment later, he and God Lord Silvermoon teleported 50 li away and appeared outside the encirclement. The sabers and swords all missed and slashed at the ground below. Bang! 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 Muffled sounds burst out. Hundreds of gullies were cut into the ground, and dozens of large pits appeared. Dust exploded into the air, engulfing the night sky. God Lord Silvermoon had dodged a calamity, but he still looked in fear at the Heaven Punishers and messaged Ji Tianxing, "What are you stopping for? Why aren't you using this chance to escape?" Escape? Ji Tianxing glanced at her, a playful smile on his lips. "They're the ones who should be escaping." As he spoke, he gripped the sword of Burial of Heaven in his right hand and unleashed 36 dazzling beams of golden light at the Heaven Punishers several dozen li away. God Lord Silvermoon froze for a moment, and then she anxiously asked, "Are you crazy? You're so severely injured, and there are still several hundred of them." However, before she could finish her sentence, she stopped abruptly. Because when Ji Tianxing's 36 beams of sword light struck the Heaven Punishers, they instantly exploded with blood. Bang bang bang! Bang! 10-some silver-armored captains and 30-some black-armored warriors were struck by the dazzling beams of sword light and instantly pulverized. Hundreds of pieces of flesh and blood splattered into the sky, outlining a shocking scene. General Lei Hong and the other captains immediately turned to Ji Tianxing, locked onto his energy with their divine senses, and launched another attack. "Kill! Kill him! Hurry and surround him! Don't let him escape!" Everyone screamed at the top of their lungs and rushed over recklessly like a raging torrent. Ji Tianxing was fearless. Instead of retreating, he charged forward with the sword of Burial of Heaven. God Lord Silvermoon stood where she was, her eyes flashing as she gazed at that not very tall but abnormally valiant figure. She couldn't help but mutter, "Only he is worthy of being called a hero, right?" Chapter 2588. God Lord Silvermoon had seen countless prodigies and experts in her life. However, none of the geniuses and experts were comparable to Ji Tianxing. He was like the blazing sun in the highest heavens, more dazzling than any star. He had a mysterious background, a proud and arrogant personality, but he was also powerful and domineering in his methods. Just as he had said, he was the nightmare of all his enemies. Even though he was fighting alone against several dozen captains and 400-some black-armored warriors, he was still unstoppable and invincible. God Lord Silvermoon had no reason to believe that he would emerge victorious and kill all the heaven-seeking experts. Reality proved that her intuition was correct. Ji Tianxing was like a tiger in a flock of sheep, boldly charging into the crowd. He fiercely attacked, using both his fists and his sword to unleash divine arts that blotted out the heavens. It was like a torrential golden torrent, rampaging through the night sky and wreaking havoc. Wherever he went, no one could stop him. Any heaven-seeking expert struck by this golden flood, whether they were the black-armored warriors or the silver-armored captains, was either killed or wounded. Flowers of blood, mixed with broken limbs, splattered into the sky. Mournful wails rang out one after another in the night sky, spreading in all directions. The number of heaven-seeking experts was rapidly dwindling. On the other hand, General Lei Hong and the heaven-seeking experts could not even touch Ji Tianxing's shadow. Even when their sabers and swords descended, 70 to 80% of them were dodged by him. Only 20 to 30% of the attacks managed to hit him, but they were unable to do any real damage. They were no different from scratching an itch. General Lei Hong and the heaven-seeking experts were deeply shocked and despaired by this result. Many of them had lost all will to fight and were only thinking of retreating. Even the foreign martial gods hiding in the distance felt their scalps go numb and their hands and feet go cold. Some of the more quick-witted people had already predicted that the heaven-seeking race would be defeated and began to think of fleeing. While no one was paying attention, they began to quietly retreat, hoping to use the cover of the night to escape. But at this moment, Ji Tianxing chased after a few heavily injured silver-armored captains and charged straight at them. He was like a golden hurricane, sweeping across the night sky. Along the way, many powerful cultivators of the heaven destroyers were crushed into pieces. Those foreign race martial gods who tried to escape were also swept away by the golden hurricane and died, without leaving behind any corpses. The surviving martial gods of the alien tribes were scared out of their wits on the spot. They hurriedly ran away while screaming at the top of their lungs. "Ah! You killed the wrong person. We are not the Heaven Punisher clan. It has nothing to do with us. True God Tianqing, spare my life." However, Ji Tianqing had no intention of letting them go. Swish! Swish! A dazzling golden hurricane swept past, engulfing everything within a radius of several hundred kilometers. The dozen or so martial gods of the alien races, who had fled in all directions, were also killed. They were all turned into pieces of flesh and blood that scattered all over the sky. Seeing this, General Lei Hong and the experts of the Heaven Punisher were stunned for a moment, and they all looked confused. Similar thoughts flashed through everyone's mind. Has this scoundrel gone berserk? Has he forgotten about friend and foe? Only God Lord Silvermoon understood that Ji Tianqing was doing this on purpose. He was doing this to avenge her, to help her vent her anger. She was rather moved by this, and a warm current flowed through her heart. She no longer watched from the sidelines. After taking a divine pill to suppress her injuries, she took up her sword and joined the battle. Although she couldn't be like Ji Tianqing, who could bravely charge into the crowd and start a massacre, she could still ambush and assassinate the black-armored warriors from the edge of the battlefield. Occasionally, a heavily injured silver-armored captain would take advantage of the chaos to flee the battlefield, but she would also kill him. Time quickly passed. Soon, 30 minutes had passed. More than half of the experts of the Heaven Punisher had been slain. More than 50 captains and more than 200 black-armored warriors had been killed by Ji Tianqing. Even their leader, General Lei Hong, had been cut into pieces by the sword of the Burial of Heaven and killed on the spot. The remaining captains and black-armored warriors were completely terrified. Everyone no longer had the slightest will to fight. They were all frightened to the point of retreating in panic and fleeing in all directions. Ji Tianqing and God Lord Silvermoon pursued, traversing 3,000 li and killing 10 captains and more than 100 black-armored warriors. In the end, only 8 captains and 100 black-armored warriors managed to escape. Ji Tianqing did not continue the pursuit. Putting away the sword of the Burial of Heaven, he returned to God Lord Silvermoon's side. After this battle, his injuries had worsened, and his divine power was almost completely drained. His face was very pale, his aura extremely weak, and his eyes were dim and lifeless. Upon seeing this, God Lord Silvermoon hurriedly took out 4 divine pills that could restore divine power and stuffed them into his hands. Ji Tianqing was just about to explain that he did not need divine pills and could use origin stones to quickly recover. But God Lord Silvermoon looked at him with concern and urged, "Don't say anything. Hurry and take these divine pills to recover. Don't leave any side effects that might affect your divine foundation." Seeing her so worried, Ji Tianqing couldn't bear to refuse her kindness, so he took all 4 divine pills. The 2 of them then left the ruined battlefield and flew off into the distance. By the time dawn finally arrived, the 2 of them had already vanished over the horizon. Half a day later, Ji Tianqing and God Lord Silvermoon entered the Zero Continent. The 2 of them found a desolate place and secluded themselves to recover. For the next half a month, the 2 of them continued to circulate their energy and did not show their faces again. By this time, the news of the destruction of the heaven-punishing divine palace and the death of the southern conquering marshal had already spread across the Zero Continent. Such explosive news was like a heaven-shaking bomb, causing a huge uproar on the continent. Whether it was the remaining experts of the heaven-punishing divine palace or the martial artists and commoners of the continent, they all found this hard to believe and shocked. No one dared to believe that the powerful southern conquering marshal, who had swept across the entire star field, had been killed by someone. Back then, the countless martial gods of Purple Firmament Star had been led by heavenly venerate Purple Firmament to fight against the heaven-punishing fleet for 40-some years, but they had still failed to kill the Southern Conquering Marshal. But now, the Southern Conquering Marshal had been killed by the Golden Divine Bird and the sword of a human youth. This was an astonishing piece of news that would shock the ages. For a moment, the martial artists and commoners of the various races rejoiced and began to loudly proclaim this news. Countless rebels appeared, attacking and killing the experts of the heaven-punishing Divine Palace in an attempt to regain their lost land and freedom. The remaining experts of the heaven-punishing Divine Palace were terrified by this news and began to flee in all directions. The heaven-punishing Divine Palace had been destroyed and the Southern Conquering Marshal was dead. They had lost their powerful backing and no longer dared to linger. All they wanted to do was leave Purple Firmament Star as quickly as possible. A massive rebellion, in which almost every citizen was a soldier, erupted on the Zero Continent. As the news spread to the other continents, the other 4 continents began to seethe. Chapter 2589. In just 1 month, the news had spread to all the continents. The heaven-punishing experts guarding the other 4 continents were all grief-stricken, and their morale was in tatters. Under the lead of many experts, the martial artists and common people of the various races joined together to resist the rule of the heaven-punishing race. Once again, the entire population was a soldier, and morale was high. The heaven-punishing experts had lost their morale and naturally did not dare to continue fighting. They were quickly defeated. Large numbers of heaven-punishing experts were killed, many warships were destroyed, and countless slaves were freed. The surviving heaven-punishing experts took their warships and desperately fled Violet Cloud Planet. The martial artists and common people of the various races used an entire 3 months to completely eliminate the heaven-punishing race. Soon after, the various continents began to rise. Countless experts emerged from the war and became the leaders of the various factions, tribes, and empires. Empire after Divine Kingdom was born, and the 5 continents of Violet Cloud Planet were reshuffled, establishing a new order. In at most a few years, the turmoil in the 5 continents would be pacified. At that time, the various divine kingdoms and races would enter a state of recuperation, and peace would return to Violet Cloud Planet. But everyone understood that peace had been restored to Violet Cloud Planet and the 5 continents had been freed from the rule of the heaven-punishing race entirely because of the Golden Divine Bird and that human youth. If that human youth and the Golden Divine Bird had not successfully killed the Southern Conquering Marshal, how could Violet Cloud Planet have been freed? The 5 continents had more than 100 races and several dozen Saint Emperors and God Lord. But in the minds of all these experts, that human youth was their leader. Many God Lords had even sent out emissaries to inquire about the whereabouts of that human youth. They wanted to express their gratitude to him in person and invite him to be the guardian of Violet Cloud Planet. Alas, the emissaries of the various God Lords scoured the 5 continents but found no trace of the human youth. In the depths of the Zero Continent, in a nameless mountain range, between 2 lofty mountains was a waterfall more than 1,000 feet high, rapidly descending like a jade belt. Below the waterfall was a clear pool of water, surrounded by round jade stones of various sizes. At this moment, Ji Tianxing and God Lord Silvermoon were seated on a large millstone next to the pool. The 2 of them sat side by side, facing the quiet pool and the waterfall that fell from the sky 3 kilometers away. Their expressions were extremely relaxed and content. After a month of closed-door recuperation, the 2 of them had mostly recovered from their injuries. Ji Tianxing stared at the pool. His body was very relaxed, but his expression was thoughtful. God Lord Silvermoon sat next to him, her arms wrapped around her calves as she pressed down on her skirt. She seemed a little cautious. Although she looked relaxed on the surface, she was actually a little nervous on the inside. There was also a trace of inexplicable joy. From time to time, she would sneak a peek at Ji Tianqing's side profile before quickly retracting her gaze and lowering her head. After all, as the divine master of the Moon Spirit clan, she had never been so close to any man before. That's right, even if she was just sitting next to Ji Tianqing, it was too intimate for her. In her mind, there were two completely different thoughts that were hesitating and struggling. On one side was the rules of the Moon Spirit clan and the dignity of a God Lord, constantly reminding her that she could not be so close to a strange man and that she needed to maintain a sufficient distance. On the other side, there was a throbbing from the depths of her heart. She very much enjoyed the feeling of being trusted and protected, and she was extremely addicted to it. Alas, even after these two thoughts intertwined for a very long time, they still could not decide a winner. She could only sit there stiffly. She couldn't get too close, but she also couldn't get too far away. As her thoughts were wandering, a wisp of light suddenly flew over from the horizon and landed in front of Ji Tianqing. The five-colored wisp of light floated in the air and began to spin. God Lord Silvermoon glanced at it and saw that the wisp of light was wrapped in a black jade slip. Ji Tianqing extended his right hand and took the jade slip. After reading the information within with his divine sense, he relaxed his brow and smiled. It's been 1 month. The majority of the heaven punishers left on Purple Heaven Star have been killed, and a small number have escaped. Based on the current situation, it will only take a few more months for the heaven punishers to be completely wiped out. After this, many empires and divine kingdoms will emerge from the 5 continents, and the situation will gradually become peaceful. Upon hearing this, God Lord Silvermoon turned to him and asked, "Did your companions send you a message?" Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, "They followed my orders and went to the other continents to kill heaven punishers and gather information." "So that's how it is." God Lord Silvermoon nodded, and then he suddenly thought of something and was shocked. "You already made your plans? Could it be that you predicted the outcome before you attempted to assassinate Marshal Jinan?" Ji Tianqing only gave a slight nod and said nothing more. God Lord Silvermoon was even more shocked, and his mind was in turmoil. Heavens! He was actually so confident? He was so sure that he could kill Marshal Jinan. After a few moments of silence, God Lord Silvermoon frowned and warned, "Tianqing, although Marshal Jinan is dead and the heaven punishers have withdrawn from Purple Heaven Star, you are still a threat. But you still can't let your guard down." Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow and seriously looked at her. "You mean to say that the heaven punishers still have a backup plan and will return?" God Lord Silvermoon gave a firm nod and solemnly said, "The heaven punishers are far more powerful than you or I imagined. Marshal Jinan is extremely powerful to us, but in the heaven punishers, he is only one of many experts." Ji Tianqing gave a slight nod and said, "Based on what I know, the leader of the heaven punishers is called Great Emperor Heaven Punishers, and he has several marshals under his command who are skilled in battle. Great Emperor Heaven Punishers is brimming with ambition and seeks to conquer all 3,000 worlds. He ordered each marshal to lead a huge fleet and invade the major star zones one by one. Marshal Jinan was responsible for conquering the Purple Heaven Star Zone, but now that he is dead, the fleet under his command is in tatters. In the short term, they will not dare to return without a true god leading them." God Lord Silvermoon nodded. "Your understanding of the heaven punishers is not as bad as I imagined. However, you have missed out on an extremely important point. There is another important reason why the heaven punishers are so powerful and have the ambition to conquer all 3,000 worlds. That is, the heaven punishers are protected by divine grace, the strongest race that has received the divine decree." Divine grace? Divine decree? Ji Tianqing frowned in confusion as he playfully asked, "How come I've never heard of this before? Who gave the divine decree to the heaven punishers?" God Lord Silvermoon did not hear the hidden meaning in his words and solemnly explained, "Very few people know of this matter, and I happen to be one of them. The Heaven Punishers were originally the strongest race in the Heaven Punishers star zone. Around 900 years ago, something happened in the upper realm that caused even the gods to be shaken. Later on, divine grace descended from the heavens and enveloped the Heaven Punishers, and a god sent down a decree. Chapter 2590. Ji Tianxing frowned at God Lord Silvermoon's mention of the divine decree and the protection of divine grace as he vaguely understood something. He calmly stared at the pool, many thoughts running through his mind. 1,000 years ago, the battle of the gods affected the three realms. After my death, the power structure of the god realm must have undergone a massive shift. Not long after that, 900-some years ago, the god realm sent down a divine decree to protect the heaven punishing race. Who sent down the divine decree? And who won the final victory and took control of the god realm? Was it him? Or her? Or that it? Did the person who sent down the divine decree want the heaven punishing race to be their spokesperson? But if they controlled the god realm, why did they need to control the 3,000 mortal worlds? Just what happened in the god realm after my death? All sorts of questions filled Ji Tianxing's mind, making him both anxious and helpless. At this moment, he only wanted to activate the laws of the world and ascend to the god realm so that he could unravel all the mysteries. But God Lord Silvermoon broke his train of thought. Tianxing? What's wrong? Ji Tianxing came back to his senses and calmly shook his head. It's nothing. God Lord Silvermoon stared at him, her voice tinged with concern. Your complexion was very unsightly just now. Are you feeling unwell? Or did your injuries relapse? Ji Tianxing indifferently replied, A true god like me has long since recovered from illness, and my injuries can't possibly relapse. You're worrying too much. God Lord Silvermoon could see that he had something on his mind, but he was unwilling to reveal it. She pursed her lips, lowered her head, and asked no more. The two of them were silent, and the mood was rather awkward. After a long while, God Lord Silvermoon asked, Tianxing, the heaven punishing race has been wiped out and Purple Firmament Star is free. What do you plan to do next? Ji Tianxing pointed up at the sky and playfully smiled. I heard long ago that Purple Firmament Star has a purple firmament cave that resides high above the heavens. It is the abode of celestial venerable purple firmament. After the heaven punishing race invaded, the southern vanquishing marshal seized control of that place. I have to personally make a trip to Purple Heaven Cave and see if there are any survivors of the heaven punishing race there. God Lord Silvermoon froze for a moment, then he smiled. That's not a bad idea. The Purple Heaven Cave is the most mysterious place on the entire Purple Heaven Star. Heavenly venerable purple firmament had lived there for tens of thousands of years. It must have been built like a divine realm. There might even be a large number of natural treasures hidden there. By the way, if you occupy the Purple Cloud Cave, you will be the new Purple Cloud Heavenly Sovereign, the guardian of the Purple Cloud planet. Guardian? Ji Tianxing arched his eyebrows and chuckled. I'm not from the Purple Cloud Star. Why should I occupy the Purple Cloud Cave and protect the Purple Cloud Star? God Lord Silvermoon was flabbergasted and asked in confusion, but you were the one who saved the tens of billions of people on the 5 continents of Purple Heaven Star. You risked your life to save the Purple Cloud planet. Don't you want to be the planet lord? Ha 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 ha. Ji Tianxing softly chuckled and shook his head. What god lord, planet lord? They're just empty titles. God Lord Silvermoon frowned and worriedly asked, You mean to say that once you finish investigating the Purple Cloud Cave, you will leave the Purple Cloud planet? Ji Tianxing did not hide anything and nodded. God Lord Silvermoon grew even more worried. But you clearly know that the heaven punishing race will not let this matter rest. They will soon send an even more powerful fleet to attack the Purple Cloud planet. If you just leave like this, the Purple Cloud planet will still be occupied by the heaven punishing race. Ji Tianxing calmly said, The heaven punishing race is too powerful. Dealing with them is not something that can be done in a day or two, and it is certainly not something that can be resolved in 1 or 2 battles. I am not the savior of the world, so how can I protect the purple cloud planet forever? This. God Lord Silvermoon was at a loss for words, not knowing how to persuade him. She was keenly aware that Ji Tianxing had already done a great favor by saving the purple cloud planet once. Ji Tianxing truly did not have any obligation or responsibility to protect the purple cloud planet forever. Moreover, she was not a member of the purple cloud planet. She could not represent the tens of billions of people of the purple cloud planet and beg Ji Tianxing to stay. Seeing that she was somewhat depressed, Ji Tianxing stood up and calmly said, "I am going to the purple cloud cave. If you have nothing else to say, let's part ways here." Ah! God Lord Silvermoon was flabbergasted once more as she subconsciously asked, You're not taking me with you?" Ji Tianxing turned to her and frowned in confusion. "When did I say that I would take you with me?" "You." God Lord Silvermoon was at a loss for words, and she asked in both disappointment and grievance, "But aren't we friends?" "Friends?" Ji Tianxing raised an eyebrow and smiled. "We'll talk about it later, if we can meet again." After saying that, his figure flashed and disappeared into the sky. Whoosh! Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, he had teleported several hundred li and vanished into the sea of clouds. God Lord Silvermoon stood on a millstone next to the pool and looked up at the empty sky. She gloomily pouted and couldn't help but stamp her foot. "Humph! That detestable scoundrel, to think that he would be so heartless! I thought that he had accepted me, but I didn't think I would die from anger." The thought of this made God Lord Silvermoon both angry and ashamed. She couldn't help but stomp the millstone into powder. Ji Tianxing strolled through the sea of clouds, his white robes flapping in the wind. As he flew east, he frowned and thought. Marshal South Conquering is very cautious. When Golden Rock and I were attacking him, he took the chance to send a message jade slip. That message was extremely unique and not one of the heaven-punishing race's usual method. It was probably used to save his life in an emergency or to send important messages. That message was most likely meant for Great Emperor Heaven Punishing. If Great Emperor Heaven Punishing learns that the purple cloud planet has been lost and that Marshal South Conquering is dead, how will he react? Will he personally lead a fleet to attack the purple cloud planet? Ji Tianxing was well aware of God Lord Silvermoon's worries and warnings. He was also well aware that the heaven-punishing race would soon return and attack the purple cloud planet. But he also understood that remaining on the purple cloud planet as a guardian was tantamount to waiting for death. He wanted to fight back against the heaven-punishing race and use them to slowly investigate the God realm. Thus, he needed to strengthen himself before the heaven-punishing race arrived. His first priority was to investigate the purple cloud cave. He had reason to believe that the cave abode that celestial venerable purple cloud had lived in for tens of thousands of years hid some sort of secret or astonishing treasure. The purple cloud cave was an alternate dimension between the purple cloud planet and the void, making it impossible for ordinary people to find it. But he had already asked Golden Rock and learned that the entrance to the purple cloud cave was in the depths of the sea of clouds. This was a vast and dangerous vortex of clouds, like a hole in the sky. It was the most dangerous forbidden zone on the purple cloud planet. Chapter 2591. Ji Tianxing flew in the sea of clouds for 5 days and 5 nights before he found the cloud whirlpool that the Golden Rock had mentioned. Looking around, there was a sea of white clouds in all directions that stretched as far as the eye could see. Only the area with a radius of 10,000 miles in the middle was a huge gap and loophole. The endless sea of clouds gathered here and were all swallowed by the gap. The terrifying whirlpool released a powerful and invisible swallowing force that crazily swallowed everything around it. Not only the clouds, but even the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was swallowed completely. Ji Tianxing stood in the sea of clouds and looked down at the whirlpool in front of him with a playful smile. The entire purple cloud planet is an oval-shaped planet that is protected by a divine light shield. No matter how much spiritual chi and clouds this whirlpool swallows, it can't be connected to the void. It must still be on purple cloud planet. Even though the huge whirlpool of clouds was extremely dangerous to ordinary people, it was still very dangerous. Martial artists who were below the martial god realm would most likely die once they entered the cloud whirlpool. However, Ji Tianxing was not worried. He calmly flew into the whirlpool. Swoosh! The rapidly spinning white cloud whirlpool swallowed him immediately. He only felt his vision go dark as if he had crashed into a huge bubble. Then, he clearly sensed that he was passing through layer after layer of alternate spaces. Every time he passed through a space, the terrifying power of space would brutally tear and cut his body. Fortunately, he had reached the true God realm and his divine body was strong enough. Moreover, he had mastered the law of space and quickly dissolved the power of space. In the blink of an eye, he passed through 4 layers of alternate spaces and entered the last space. In the next moment, light returned to his vision. Looking around, he was surrounded by a clear and cloudless sky. Below his feet was an endless primeval forest. In the dark green forest, there were towering trees that were hundreds of feet tall. Visible light green wood energy rose from them. Hundreds of miles away, at the end of the primeval forest, was a towering mountain range. The mountain range was thousands of feet tall. The upper half of the mountain range was shrouded in clouds and mist. Ji Tianxing looked around and confirmed that he was in the purple cloud cave. This was because the world was filled with a terrifying amount of spiritual chi of heaven and earth, as well as an extremely dense aura of divine power. He didn't need to deliberately circulate his energy to absorb it. The omnipresent aura of divine power would automatically enter his body. This made his body and mind feel comfortable, and his divine power became even more abundant. Even the wounds that had not fully healed were slowly recovering under the nourishment of the divine power. His divine power is actually so abundant? I don't think you can find another cave abode like this in the entire purple cloud star. Ji Tianxing was secretly surprised. He was also filled with anticipation towards this unfamiliar purple heaven cave. He thought to himself that since the divine power of Purple Heaven Cave was so abundant, the flowers, trees, birds, and beasts must be extraordinary after being nourished and nurtured by the divine power for a long time. As expected, when he flew over the primitive forest, he found many strange flowers and herbs in the deep forest. They had all grown into divine medicines. Even tribulation and saint-grade medicinal herbs had become divine-grade medicinal herbs after being nourished by divine power for thousands of years. There were also some birds and beasts with ordinary bloodlines that were limited by their talents and bloodlines. They could only reach the tribulation level, but they had also broken through to the saint level. When Ji Tianxing flew over the majestic mountain range, he saw a lake with a radius of thousands of miles on the grassland ahead. In the middle of the mirror-like lake, there were 2 demonic beasts the size of mountains fighting fiercely. Flying in the sky and initiating the attack was a golden-crowned eagle the size of a mountain. This type of demonic beast was very common. Its bloodline level was lower than that of mutated beasts, and it was worlds apart from divine beasts. However, that golden-crowned eagle had lived for more than 10,000 years and had reached the immortal level. It spread its wings and covered the sky. When it opened its sharp beak, it spat out golden divine fire that covered the sky and poured into the lake, attacking a giant double-headed snake that was more than 10,000 feet long. The double-headed snake was originally an ordinary black water snake, and its entire body was pitch black. However, it had lived in the lake for more than 10,000 years and had reached the peak of the saint level, and was about to break through to the immortal level. 30% of the black scales on its body had also shrunk, and many new black dragon scales had grown out. Even under its flat abdomen, 4 giant sarcomas had protruded, and sharp dragon claws were about to grow. Ji Tianqing knew at a glance that once the black water snake broke through to the immortal level, it would meet the wind and clouds and transform into a flood dragon. This is indeed an excellent cave abode. Even the bloodlines of some common demonic beasts can break through the limits of talent. If the white dragon and I cultivate here, with the help of source stones we can definitely improve our strength quickly. Ji Tianqing muttered to himself, and a glint of light flashed across his eyes. He looked even more expectant. Moreover, the flow of time here is slightly faster than the outside world, about twice as fast. In the mortal world, there are only a handful of cave abodes that can accelerate time. When he thought of this, Ji Tianqing felt that the Purple Heaven Cave was even more precious. It would be a pity if he gave up on this cave abode so easily. Before he knew it, 15 minutes had passed. Ji Tianqing flew to the end of the vast grassland and arrived above a majestic mountain range. This mountain range was thousands of feet high, but it extended in all directions, branching into 5 branches. It was like a giant cauldron with 5 legs, looking majestic and mysterious. At the intersection of the 5 branches, there was a giant mountain that was thousands of feet high, standing proudly in the sea of clouds. Ji Tianqing looked at the terrain of this mountain range, and guessed that it was a man-made divine range. In this way, this mountain range became the core of the Purple Heaven Cave, where the spiritual qi and divine power of heaven and earth gathered. And that giant mountain that was thousands of feet high was the core of the divine range. It was the top cultivation ground in the Purple Heaven Cave. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing flew over the sea of clouds and towards the peak of the giant mountain. When he was still 200 miles away, he could already see a majestic palace on the flat and wide mountain peak. The palace was huge, occupying more than 20 miles in radius. It had 9 floors and was thousands of feet high. The palace was mainly dark gold, mixed with silver and purple, looking mysterious and glorious. However, the giant palace had been through tens of thousands of years and was mottled, revealing an ancient aura. There was a wide square in front of the palace. The ground was paved with colorful divine power crystals, shining brightly. What surprised Ji Tianqing was that there were 8 heaven punishers in silver armor guarding the steps that connected the square to the palace gate. The 8 silver-armored guards were somewhat absent-minded. They didn't look dignified at all. They actually gathered together and whispered to each other about something. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately sneered. Ha ha! These abandoned wretches still don't know that the outside world has changed, right? Chapter 2592. Although they were far away, Ji Tianqing could still hear the conversation of the 8 silver-armored guards. The 8 guards were a little restless, and their voices were full of worry and anxiety. It's been a month. Why hasn't anyone come? Yes. Previously, the Grand Marshal had instructed that a batch of talented captains should be sent here 10 days ago for closed-door training. I don't know what's going on. I sent messages to several generals, but no one replied to me. I heard that Commander Sun also sent a message to the Grand Marshal, but he hasn't received a response for 10 days. It's fine if the generals don't reply, but why hasn't the Grand Marshal sent a message? I'm thinking, did something happen outside? Don't talk nonsense. Be careful that Commander Sun hears you and will punish you according to military law. Several silver-armored guards whispered to each other. Obviously, they all had a hunch that something was wrong. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing sneered even more. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, he fell from the sky and landed on the colorful square. Outside the gate of the palace, the 8 silver-armored guards on the steps immediately sensed that something was wrong. Everyone stopped talking and turned to look at Ji Tianqing, locking their eyes on him. After seeing his appearance clearly, everyone turned pale with fright and drew their swords and sabers in unison. Who is it? How dare you trespass into the Violet Divine Palace? How did this alien get in? Cut the crap. Capture him first and hand him over to Commander Sun. Several silver-armored guards were surprised and confused. Under the leadership of their captain, they waved their swords and charged at Ji Tianqing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone spread out and surrounded Ji Tianqing. They waved their swords and swords, creating a red light that covered the sky and shrouded him. Ji Tianqing had no intention of drawing his sword. His whole body lit up with a hazy golden light, forming a protective divine light. Bang, bang, bang! Dozens of dark red swords and swords slashed on the golden light shield one after another, producing a series of muffled sounds. But the swords and swords all collapsed, and the golden light shield was intact. Ji Tianqing was safe and sound. His body didn't even shake. He looked at everyone coldly and said indifferently, "Call the others here. I'll deal with them all together." Seeing this, the 8 silver-armored guards widened their eyes in horror as if they had seen a ghost. "Gosh, who is this guy? He actually took our attacks head-on, and he's still unharmed? He's an intruder. Inform Commander Sun." A silver-armored guard let out a soul roar, summoned the other guards in the palace, and reported the news to Commander Sun. Soon, another 8 silver-armored guards and over 100 black-armored warriors rushed out of the palace. At the front of the troop was a tall guard in golden armor. His strength was at the LV6 martial god realm. Swoosh, swoosh. In just the blink of an eye, more than 100 guards of the Heaven Punishing sect entered the square and surrounded Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stood where he was, waiting with an indifferent expression. He was not afraid at all. The Heaven Punishing race had the advantage in numbers. The 8 silver-armored guards also gained confidence and calmed down. The leader of the golden-armored guards stepped out of the crowd. He pointed his long sword at Ji Tianqing and shouted, "Alien, who are you? How did you break into Purple Heaven Cave?" This person was Commander Sun, whom the silver-armored guards had mentioned. Currently, he was the person with the highest status and the strongest ability in Purple Heaven Cave. Ji Tianqing looked at Commander Sun indifferently and said expressionlessly, "I'm the one who wants your lives." Commander Sun frowned and grinned. "Little bastard, you're so arrogant that it's ridiculous." Ji Tianqing looked at him with pity and shook his head. "What a bunch of pitiful worms. You don't even know that you're about to die." Commander Sun and the silver-armored guards were infuriated by his arrogance. They were instantly enraged and murderous intent surged from their bodies. "Little bastard, since you're so stubborn, I'll capture you first and slowly interrogate you." As he spoke, Commander Sun waved his long sword and slashed out a shocking sword radiance toward Ji Tianqing. The silver-armored guards and hundreds of black-armored guards roared in unison and attacked with their swords and sabers. In an instant, hundreds of sword radiances covered the sky and a dark red brilliance shrouded the entire square. Ji Tianqing did not waste any more time and finally attacked. "Sword blade storm." He shouted coldly and formed a mysterious sword seal with both hands. His body emitted a golden light that shot into the sky and released an endless golden sword radiance. Swoosh! He instantly transformed into a golden hurricane that was thousands of feet tall. Thousands of golden swords shot out and created a fierce wind in the square. The red light blades that covered the sky were shattered into pieces when they came into contact with the golden sword radiance. A violent shockwave exploded. Swoosh! 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 The golden sword radiance, which was as dense as a rain of arrows, shrouded the entire square and killed many powerful cultivators. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen black-armored guards were sliced into pieces by the sword radiance. Blood splattered everywhere. Soon after, a few silver-armored guards were also swallowed by the sword radiance. The silver-armored guards that they wore were shattered by the sword radiance. Their physical bodies were also sliced into pieces and turned into scrap. In just a few breaths, more than 30 people were killed by the sword radiance. Not even their bones were left. As the sword blade storm moved quickly and wreaked havoc in the square, the number of powerful cultivators decreased rapidly. In just a few breaths, more than 100 black-armored guards were killed. Only 7 silver-armored guards and commanders soon were left alive. However, they were also covered in wounds and blood. Everyone was scared out of their wits by Ji Tianqing's terrifying strength. They fled in panic. However, before they could escape from the square, they were killed by Ji Tianqing. After a while, the battle ended. The square was deserted. Ji Tianqing was the only one left. The sword blade storm dissipated. The dazzling golden light also retracted into his body. He walked expressionlessly. He stepped over the bloodstains and debris on the ground and walked toward the gate of the palace. There were not many guards guarding the palace. Almost all of them had been killed by him. This time, he was unimpeded. No one appeared to stop him. The gate of the majestic palace was wide open. Ji Tianqing stepped over the tall threshold and entered a spacious hall. This was the first floor of the palace. The hall, which had a radius of 3,000 feet, was empty. There were only reliefs carved on the surrounding walls and many statues placed in the corners. Ji Tianqing walked around the hall and carefully observed the reliefs on the walls. He recognized that they were written in Xixiao planet's language. However, they were of no practical value. Therefore, he walked toward the stairs in the corner of the hall and arrived at the second floor of the palace. On the second floor of the palace, there were several crisscrossing passageways. On both sides of the passageways were secret rooms with tightly shut doors. The doors of the secret rooms were sealed by arrays. Ji Tianqing used a small trick to break the sealing array and open the door of a secret room. To his surprise, there was a young martial god of the heaven defying in the secret room. He was cultivating in seclusion.